Welcome to Novel Love Hearing. We bring you hundreds of novel audiobooks covering every genre and every kind of story you can imagine. Action? We've got it. Adventure? Absolutely. Horror? Of course. Whether it's the legendary Uchiha massacre or outrageous tales like stealing Naruto's and Sasuke's women, you'll find it here. From epic series like One Piece, Bleach, Fairy Tail, and Hunter x Hunter, to countless other adventures, our library has it all. Love novels but don't have time to read? No worries, just plug in your earbuds, sit back, and let the story take over. Good listening, and happy hearing. Only a handful of Hyuga clan members remained, harboring a glimmer of hope. If their clan head could unleash his full power and achieve a grand victory, their safety would be assured. Unfortunately, they were destined for disappointment. After hours of anticipation, the result was anticlimactic. The two combatants calmly descended back to the ground, unharmed. Judging from their postures, it seemed neither had any intention of continuing the fight. Release them. Hyuga Tenjin commanded with a wave of his sleeve, his expression anything but pleasant. In contrast, the Senju clan leader, Hashirama, maintained his ever-present smile as he instructed his subordinates to untie the captured Hyuga members. Elder brother. Obiramo began, as if about to object, but Hashirama shot him a sharp glare. Sulking, Obirama clamped his mouth shut and turned away in frustration. Despite the prolonged clash, neither side had been able to land a decisive blow, and the battle seemed to stretch on endlessly. No matter how much Hashirama's strength had advanced, he couldn't rely solely on his wood dragon technique to defeat Tenjin, who had activated the Tenseigan Chakra mode. The truce, in the end, was not due to a lack of effort but rather mutual understanding because Tenjin had realized he couldn't suppress the young Senju leader before him. Likewise, Hashirama couldn't defeat Tenjin either, as his attacks had proven equally ineffective. Over the course of 3 exhausting hours, Tenjin had burned through 70% of his chakra reserves, yet Hashirama still appeared as vigorous as ever. The result was clear. Tenjin knew in his heart where he stood. Adding to the weight of defeat, his clan members had all been captured. By every measure, the Hyuga had lost this conflict. Thank you, clan leader Hashirama. Tenjin muttered with veiled gratitude before leading his subordinates away from the battlefield. The inability to overcome Hashirama left Hyuga Tenjin deeply frustrated. Not long ago, he had been able to suppress the Senju leader completely. Yet now, in such a short span of time, Hashirama had grown to the point where he could fight him to a draw. For the proud Tenjin, this was an unacceptable outcome. Unfortunately, at his current level of strength, even small improvements posed an immense challenge. Hard work alone wouldn't suffice. The only viable path forward was the further evolution of his Tenseigan. This thought turned his gaze toward his disciple, whose expression remained an impenetrable mask. Tenjin was well aware that his disciple had recently awakened the Tenseigan. Nothing on the battlefield escaped his keen perception. If he were to absorb his disciple's ocular power, could his own eyes achieve further evolution? This prospect filled Hyuga Tenjin with anticipation. However, on second thought, he decided against acting impulsively. Absorption was inevitable. After all, to Tenjin, it was only natural for the branch family to make sacrifices for the main family's leader. But he needed to wait patiently. Once his disciple surpassed the initial development stage, her ocular power would increase by tenfold. Absorbing it then would yield the greatest benefit. With this in mind, Tenjin hypocritically offered encouragement. You've done well. Keep up the good work. Yes, master. Yaoi, his disciple, bowed with her usual respectful demeanor. Her humble and deferential attitude only strengthened Tenjin's trust in her. That night, Hyuga Tenjin sat alone in his tent, replaying the details of his battle with Hashirama in his mind. Suddenly, a shadow materialized before him, silent and still. The visitor was none other than Black Zetsu, the ancient schemer. An eerie laugh echoed in the silence, nearly provoking Tenjin into an attack. If you laugh like that again, I'll crush your skull with a single palm strike. Tenjin snapped, his irritation rising as he glanced at Black Zetsu's inhuman form, and his irritation only deepened. Damn it, does this thing even have a skull? Tenjin's words were blunt and cutting, and any ordinary person would have taken offense or retaliated on the spot. But Black Zetsu was no ordinary being. It didn't care. After all, it wasn't human. Do you wish to gain the power to defeat Senju Hashirama? It wasted no time, striking at the heart of Tenjin's desires. Caught in a moment of frustration, Tenjin found himself unable to resist the allure of such a promise. I thought you said before that these eyes couldn't grow any stronger. Tenjin replied coldly, recalling Black Zetsu's earlier, confident claims. And now, only a few years later, it was contradicting itself? In Tenjin's mind, Black Zetsu was already labeled as untrustworthy. Black Zetsu responded simply. Ordinary methods won't suffice, of course. The truth was, Kyosuke's arrival had not only disrupted the Uchiha and Senju clans but had also deeply impacted Black Zetsu. The strength of the Hidden Moon Village clan had left it deeply shaken. Their human puppets, capable of fighting without chakra threads, seemed far superior to its White Zetsu army. What fascinated Black Zetsu even more was their unique ability to grow in numbers through battle. It was a feature that filled it with envy. It envisioned an unstoppable army, one it could wield alongside its mother after her resurrection, to conquer other worlds. By that point, the Otsutsuki clan would likely be the ones fearing them. This thought promoted Black Zetsu to take a second look at Obirama Senju's summoning, Impure World Reincarnation technique. Initially dismissive of the technique, it had since undergone a drastic change in perspective. Why? Because of a single, unexpected event. For a long time, Kyosuke's existence had been a constant thorn in Black Zetsu's side. Surveillance was indispensable. Even if it couldn't track his space-time movements, it could at least grasp his general whereabouts. Through this vigilance, Black Zetsu became aware of Hyuga Yaoi's presence and, through her scientific research, uncovered the immense potential of the summoning, Impure World Reincarnation technique. Infiltrating the Senju clan to steal their forbidden jutsu or pilfering Yaoi's research results pose no challenge at all for the cunning schemer. By combining the two, summoning, Impure World Reincarnation finally gained true strategic value. For Black Zetsu, the implications were even more profound. Over the centuries, it had encountered countless powerful individuals, many of whom possessed rare Kekkei Genkai abilities. Amidst a series of cold chuckles, Black Zetsu's form writhed and stretched, sprawling across the ground. All of this unfolded beneath Hyuga Tenjin's unblinking, watchful gaze as a cloaked figure silently emerged from Black Zetsu's writhing form. Although it couldn't envelop living beings, unsummoning, Impure World Reincarnation body lacked any characteristics of life, making it particularly convenient for transport. What is this thing? Tenjin frowned deeply, immediately sensing the unnatural nature of the summoning, Impure World Reincarnation body. Humphrey. It is, of course, something that can assist you greatly. Black Zetsu said with a sinister laugh. With it, you can forcibly complete your evolution. After a brief silence, Tenjin asked in a low voice. What price must I pay? He knew his visitor was no philanthropist. If Black Zetsu had sought him out, it surely had its own agenda. Without conditions, the offer would seem too good to be true. I want you to help me kill someone. Who? Kyosuke Uchiha. Black Zetsu finally revealed its goal. Before Tenjin could respond, Black Zetsu swayed its form and spoke first, cutting him off. I know your concerns. Rest assured, I will create the perfect opportunity for you. Who knows? It continued slyly. You might even reclaim what should have rightfully been yours in the first place. Chapter 161, The Fire Temple, First Encounter between Madara and Jigen. The Land of Fire, established during the early days of the Warring States period, was a nation born amidst chaos. In its initial stages, the daimyos were enthusiastic about hiring the fragmented ninja clans from the former shinobi sect, Ninshu, to combat other nations. However, due to the immense destruction caused by ninja battles, the five great nations gradually segregated the worldly wars from the shinobi world. The Land of Fire, blessed with abundant resources and a favorable living environment, became the first nation in the history of the shinobi world to establish a unified hidden village. Following the foundation of the Hidden Leaf Village in the Land of Fire, the Land of Wind, the Land of Lightning, the Land of Earth, and the Land of Water all emulated this model, establishing their own hidden villages. Thus began an era where the five great nations dominated and unified the shinobi world. Beyond the future Hidden Leaf Village, the Land of Fire boasted many unique architectural structures, such as the numerous temples scattered throughout the nation. Among them, the most renowned and largest was the Fire Temple, a relic passed down from ancient times. On this particular day, the Fire Temple welcomed two unusual guests. On the long staircase leading up to the temple, Madara Uchiha gazed at the towering structure before him. Is that thing really sealed here? He asked. Of course. Kyosuke replied with a faint smile, his mind clearly calculating something unknown. Seeing this, Madara shook his head in exasperation. From a long time ago, he had found it impossible to see through his friend's thoughts. Before arriving at the Fire Temple, the two had discreetly met with the recently returned Hyuga Yaoi. It was only then that Madara learned that the most outstanding young ninja of the Hyuga clan had long since become one of Kyosuke's subordinates. Madara was further astonished by the transplantation of sage body cells, a revelation that shook him to his core. Over the years of battle, Madara's eyesight had indeed deteriorated significantly. He had assumed Kyosuke would face the same problem, only to discover that his friend had already found an excellent solution. Taking advantage of the moment, Kyosuke also disclosed the existence of the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, explaining that it might be the ultimate form of the Sharingan. Predictably, Madara showed no interest in this revelation. To him, Izuna's significance far surpassed any notion of the eternal eye. Thanks to Yateway's exceptional scientific expertise, the fusion of cells within Madara progressed remarkably smoothly. Within just a few days, he had completely fused the cells, leaving an indelible mark of Kyosuke's presence on his right atrium. If not for the urgency to head to the fire temple, Madara might have considered trying to practice sage mode. It seemed that, no matter how the storyline changes, certain patterns of thought remain unchanged. During the Fourth Great Ninja War, the resurrected Madara absorbed a massive amount of sage chakra from the reanimated Hashirama. Though clearly elated, he still pretended to be indifferent. Regardless, Madara Uchiha at this moment was undoubtedly stronger than ever before. As for the impact on the storyline, Kyosuke had long since ceased to care. To put it bluntly, the final boss on this stage of Earth was Kaguya Otsutsuki. As long as she didn't appear, everything else seemed manageable. At the very least, Kyosuke was confident in dealing with any crisis other than Otsutsuki Kaguya herself. Otsutsuki Ishiki? He was just a dying figure clinging to survival. Without consuming a chakra fruit, he couldn't even achieve immortality. Even if Kyosuke stood right before him, Ishiki wouldn't dare make a move. And by the time Ishiki found a suitable vessel for reincarnation, who knew how many years would have passed? By then, Kyosuke might be strong enough to crush Kaguya single-handedly. Why would he fear a being who didn't even dare to interfere in the shinobi world's processes? Some beings seem alive, but in truth, they died thousands of years ago. This description suited Otsutsuki Ishiki perfectly. I have nothing to fear from him, Kyosuke declared with an unwavering conviction. Thus, upon meeting the abbot of the fire temple, accompanied by the monk Jigen, Kyosuke's expression became particularly interesting. Kyosuke Dono, it has been many years. How have you been? Jigen greeted him cordially. Madara Uchiha cast a sidelong glance at his companion. He hadn't noticed before, but Kyosuke's social circle was unexpectedly vast. Hyuga Yateway was one thing, but now even a random monk from a remote temple knew him. Madara couldn't help but wonder what Kyosuke was doing during his frequent venture. Could he be preparing to become a monk? Harboring malicious curiosity, Madara was about to retract his gaze when he suddenly noticed a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of tension on Kyosuke's face. Was he nervous? This discovery surprised Madara greatly. Seizing the moment while no one noticed, he discreetly activated his Mengekyo Sharingan, employing the soul-related ability of his right eye. Having transplanted sage body cells, Madara's lost ocular power was gradually recovering. He even felt that his total ocular power was slowly increasing over time. Although the process was slow, taking at least 20 to 30 years for significant changes, it was progress nonetheless. With his ocular power no longer an issue, Madara could use his Mengekyo abilities without restraint. If he wished, he could summon Susanoo even without activating his Mengekyo Sharingan. This was because the power of the Sharingan had long since been deeply imprinted on his very soul. As long as his soul endured, Madara could even achieve extraordinary feats like leaving his physical body as a spirit. In this soul state, he could still perform slightly weakened versions of his ninjutsu. In other words, the enhancement from the sage body cells made Madara's strength far beyond terrifying. However, this newfound confidence didn't last long. Upon probing, Madara could never have imagined that an ordinary monk in the fire temple would possess a soul so overwhelmingly powerful it dwarfed that of everyone present combined. For a brief moment, he wondered if his vision was playing tricks on him. The terrifying, mountain-like presence. Was that something a human could possess? Inside the grand hall of the fire temple. With the visit of the Uchiha clan leader, the abbot naturally extended the highest courtesy in his reception. This was not like the era of the Hidden Leaf, where protocol and rules governed everything, leaving little room for chaos. During the Warring States period, things were entirely different. If the two before him were angered, the Uchiha army could swiftly descend upon the temple, and slaughter everyone within. It wasn't wisdom that made the abbot so accommodating. It was fear of the two gods standing before him. Little did he know, the two men's thoughts were already far from him. Casting a sidelong glance at Kyosuke, who was eloquently engaging the abbot, Madara slowly relaxed his clenched fists, though his gaze occasionally and deliberately swept over the young monk. To his surprise, the monk seemed aware of his attention. In an unintentional moment, their eyes met. Humphrey. The prideful dance king would never allow himself to be intimidated. When the monk returned his gaze, Madara scoffed coldly and sharply asked. The fire temple truly lives up to its reputation if even an ordinary monk like you is so extraordinary. What is your name? Jigen. The monk replied with a faint smile, showing no sign of offense. Centuries of practice had shaped Jigen into a courteous and composed figure, someone who knew when to advance and retreat. Even someone as formidable as Madara Uchiha couldn't find fault with him in conversation. Well, an ordinary monk indeed. Madara remarked, shaking his head as if to dismiss the matter. Regardless of who the man truly was, the priority was to complete their mission. Abbot, I am here to borrow the Ninetales. Chapter 162, All beings suffer, yet those who believe in me may be delivered from calamity. The fire temple held a revered status, so Madara's demeanor today could be considered unusually polite. For someone accustomed to giving orders in a commanding tone, it was rare for him to utter the word please. Yet, there were always those who failed to appreciate such courtesy. When the temple's abbot heard Madara's request to borrow the Ninetales, he immediately shook his head, decisively refusing. Impossible. The matter of the Ninetales is far too significant. It cannot be loaned out on a whim. He continued, his tone earnest and sincere. Back then, sealing it cost the lives of over 20 monks from our temple. Only then were we barely able to imprison it within the altar. If it were to break free, not only the land of fire but the entire shinobi world would face catastrophe. The abbot's words were reasonable and heartfelt. A regular person might have been moved by the monk's conviction. But the man before him was no ordinary individual. He was the clan leader of the Uchiha, the current reincarnation of Indra's chakra. If mere words could sway him, Aja wouldn't have needed to traverse countless lifetimes to guide his brother. Old man, I wasn't asking for your opinion. Madara suddenly stood, his overwhelming killing intent instantly causing the monks' faces to pale. Seeing this, Kyosuke, who had been quietly observing, spoke in an almost leisurely tone. If you keep rumbling, I don't know about the shinobi world, but I can assure you the fire temple is about to face a calamity of its own. Preposterous. The abbot stood as well, his voice trembling with indignation, though it betrayed an underlying fear. In recent years, the Uchiha name has spread across the shinobi world. I thought you had changed, but I see you're still as unreasonable as ever. The Ninetales is a disaster sealed by the lives of our predecessors. Even if the temple is destroyed today, we will never allow you to unseal it. Humphrey. Madara snorted coldly, crossing his arms over his chest, his voice sharp and merciless. In that case, I'll send you all to join your predecessors today to atone for your sins. All monks, defend the temple with your lives. The abbot roared, adopting a stance that showed he was ready to fight to the death. The atmosphere in the room grew tense, as though a battle could break out at any moment. Yet amidst this, only Kyosuke and Jigen remained calmly seated, as though the chaos had nothing to do with them. You're not going to step in? Kyosuke asked, narrowing his eyes as he gauged Jigen's strength. If he could push Jigen to reveal his true power, Kyosuke wouldn't hesitate to flee immediately. Even if it killed him, he'd ensure he outlasted his opponent's physical limits, no matter the cost. To Kyosuke, Otsutsuki Ishiki was a threat that had to be eliminated. It wasn't just their opposing alignments that concerned Kyosuke. What worried him more was the divine tree sapling. Essentially a juvenile Ninetales. That Ishiki now controlled. In ancient times, Kaguya was meant to be the sacrifice for cultivating the Ninetales. Yet through her own efforts, she turned the tables, taking over and leaving him trapped as earwax for millennia. The Ninetales, deprived of its nourishment, now lay dormant in a dimension created by Ishiki, its future uncertain as it awaited the chance to resume its chakra cultivation. Knowing this, Kyosuke had long set his sights on that Ninetales. Once he awakened the Rinnegan and enhanced his physique to the high-level sage body, he would be able to control the juvenile Ninetales. If he could replenish its chakra and seal it within himself, Kyosuke would ascend to the level of a true Six Paths sage. People often said human strength had its limits, and the Six Paths level was the boundary ordinary humans could never surpass. To surpass that limit, one needed the chakra of the divine tree. Of course, Kyosuke also had another option. He could beseech the Sage of Six Paths to grant him yin-yang style, thereby breaking through to the Six Paths level. However, this relied on the condition that the power granted wasn't a one-time use. Yet in that case, he'd merely be a lesser version of Otsutsuki Hagoromo. This wasn't an ideal outcome for Kyosuke. Besides, as someone who wasn't Indra's reincarnation, that so-called benevolent and compassionate Sage of Six Paths might not be willing to offer him his power. Rather than relying on the charity of others, Kyosuke preferred to take matters into his own hands. But first, he had to deal with Otsutsuki Ishiki. Or rather, the monk Jigen before him. Having seen through the tension between them, Jigen smiled faintly, clasped his hands together, and spoke in a calm, indifferent tone. This humble monk seeks to save and enlighten all beings, but alas, the masses refuse to turn back. Take this benefactor, for example. On the surface, he seeks power, but in truth, he is walking the path of self-destruction. He is like this and so are you. Ignoring his remarks about Madara, Kyosuke eyed him curiously and asked. Are you implying that my so-called death is imminent again? He emphasized the word again. Mocking Jigen's cryptic warning from years prior. Back then, Black Zetsu had allied with 2 clan leaders to seal his space-time ninjutsu. Yet, against all odds, Kyosuke had killed one and escaped. The ordeal, though perilous, hardly resembled the inescapable death Jigen had predicted. Now, this self-proclaimed holy man was spouting the same nonsense again, and Kyosuke was genuinely curious what his so-called path of destruction would bring this time. Ha! As if sensing his scorn, Jigen lowered his gaze, murmuring in an oddly tranquil tone. Ah, mortals! Your understanding of life and death fundamentally differs from mine. Life does not necessarily mean freedom, nor does death guarantee liberation. All beings suffer, yet those who believe in me may be delivered from calamity. Before his words had fully settled, 2 figures abruptly appeared beside Kyosuke. Whether this gentleman can be delivered, let my humble servants decide. Jigen said softly. Well, long time no see. One of the newcomers sneered, launching a kick at Kyosuke with such speed that even the Sharingan struggled to follow. Even Madara, who was locked in battle with the monks, turned slightly, surprised at the strength of the white-robed monk's servant. Unfortunately, such an attack still couldn't harm Kyosuke. A golden skeletal ribcage appeared out of thin air, materializing in a phantom-like form to effortlessly block the strike. However, the attack's speed was so staggering that the sheer acceleration transformed its force, making it far more powerful than anticipated. Even with Suzunu's protection, Kyosuke was still forced back several meters, the sheer force of the attack undeniable. A testament to the terrifying power behind the kick. Glancing down at the torn mat beneath him, Kyosuke sighed, slowly rising from his seated position. Well, this is unexpected. I didn't think I'd run into you here, Shiba. The assailant was none other than Shiba Ryota, the wielder of swift release, whom Kyosuke encountered during his time at the arena. Now, it appeared Ryota had pledged his loyalty to Jigen. Life's full of surprises, brat. Ryota sneered, his arrogance undiminished, though his strength clearly justified his attitude. Swift release wasn't to be underestimated, its blistering speed shattered the sound barrier with ease. If Kyosuke's visual prowess hadn't grown significantly, Suzunu's ribs might not have been able to block the kick. Ignoring Ryota's taunts, Kyosuke shifted his gaze to the dark-skinned man standing silently beside him. This was Okamura Tsutomu, another of the arena manager's pawns. Unlike Ryota, Tsutomu was a man of few words. Yet he possessed a rare KK Genkai, known as Steel Style. Chapter 163, Jigen, Showing Off and Running Away, Truly Thrilling Steel Style, a combination of Earth Style and Lightning Style nature transformations, is said to be achievable only when both elements reach a sufficiently high level. By estimation, one would need to master both elements at least to level 8 to even have a chance at creating something akin to Okamura Tsutomu's Steel Style. Chakra nature transformations, Lightning, Level 7, Earth, Level 5. 8 years had passed since Kyosuke transmigrated into this world. Yet, even though Lightning Style was his most frequently used chakra nature, he had only managed to develop its nature transformation to level 7. As for Earth Style, it was still a distant goal. This illustrated the harsh reality. Ninja weren't lacking in ability, but the conditions required to create a KK Genkai were simply too demanding. Even for prodigies blessed with extraordinary talent, it would take at least 2 decades of grueling practice to achieve success. Judging by the appearances of the 2 individuals before him, it was highly unlikely that they were the original creators of Swift Release and Steel Style. At most, they were beneficiaries of some ancestral legacy. Dispersing the Suzunus surrounding him, Kyosuke drew the Kusanagi blade from his waist. Holding it level, the razor-sharp edge aligned directly with Okamura Tsutomu, the Steel Style user, whose cold and indifferent expression betrayed no hint of emotion. Interesting. Kyosuke said, his tone brimming with confidence. Let's see whether the spear is sharper or the shield sturdier. The Kusanagi blade, renowned for its supposed ability to cut through anything, might not fully live up to its legend, but its sharpness was beyond question. Kyosuke was curious whether the blade's sharpness alone could pierce through his opponent's Steel Style enhanced skin. With those words, he moved. In an instant, his figure vanished, reappearing beside the enemy with a speed just slightly slower than Shiba Ryota's. So fast. Before the thought fully formed in Okamura Tsutomu's mind, the Kusanagi blade was already slicing through the air in a diagonal slash, its icy gleam reflecting the tension in the battlefield and sending a chill down his spine. Yet, he chose not to retreat. As a Steel Style user, his strength lay in his unwavering resolve to press forward. Just as the blade neared him, a dark gray sheen enveloped his arm. A clear sign he had pushed his KK Genkai to its utmost limit. Clang. A crisp metallic sound rang out as the Kusanagi blade successfully cut through Okamura's skin. However, it failed to sever his arm entirely. Despite this, the blade demonstrated its superior sharpness by breaking through the Steel Style defense, though the resulting wound was shallow. Not bad. At least it wasn't a total loss. Kyosuke muttered. Leveraging the rebound force from the clash, he twisted his waist, his right leg whipping out with ferocious speed. The powerful roundhouse kick struck Okamura squarely, sending him hurtling through the air. Before Okamura could hit the ground, Shiba Ryota's figure materialized beside Kyosuke, moving so swiftly that he didn't even have time to reactivate his Susanoo for defense. Fortunately, Kyosuke had anticipated this. With a thought, he vanished, reappearing in the forest outside the fire temple. Flying Thunder God technique. Damn it. Shiba Ryota cursed as his punch struck empty air, leaving him momentarily frozen in place. Before his anger could fully manifest, Kyosuke activated the Flying Thunder God technique once more, reappearing on the battlefield with the Kusanagi blade in hand. In one swift motion, he launched a powerful kick, sending Ryota hurtling through the air as well. As chakra surged through his eyes, an extraordinary transformation took place. Kyosuke's visual prowess evolved, and a new set of Sharingan emerged in his eyes. The six-pointed star in his pupils now bore 3 rotating, scythe-like patterns encircling its edges. A pair of legendary eyes revered as the pinnacle of Uchiha power, said to remain unclouded for eternity. The eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. The game of probing ends here. Kyosuke declared coldly, his voice resonating with unshakable authority as he ignored the 2 enemies struggling to rise. His body ascended, a dark golden glow erupting from him, illuminating the battlefield and painting the sky with its ominous radiance. Surrounded by the overwhelming power of his new eyes, Kyosuke hovered above the ground, his gaze resolute and unyielding. The sheer force of his killing intent bore down on the monk Jigen, who remained seated below. If you're so eager to test me, Kyosuke challenged, his voice slicing through the tension like a blade. Why not come down and fight me yourself? Despite the suffocating chakra pressure that could drive weaker men to despair, Jigen remained unmoved. Still seated on his meditation cushion, his expression exuded unshakable tranquility, as if the chaos around him was nothing more than a passing breeze. You jest, my friend. Jigen replied calmly. I'm but a humble scholar of Buddhist teachings, incapable of matching the might of someone like you, who dominates the shinobi world. However, allow me to remind you, danger is approaching, and your time may be running out. As he spoke, Shiba Ryota and Okamura Tsutomu moved to Jigen's side. Behind them, a black, swirling portal resembling a void appeared, slowly swallowing their figures. Before they disappeared completely, Kyosuke caught a glimpse of Jigen's icy gaze and the strange black mark on his body resembling a curse seal. Kama seal. After a brief silence, Kyosuke dispersed his still-forming colossal Susanoo. If Black Zetsu represented scheming, Jigen symbolized raw power. Both were threats Kyosuke had to tread carefully around. The former always lurked in the shadows, never revealing himself, while the latter possessed a patience that allowed him to feign submission in the shinobi world for thousands of years. As Kyosuke considered the lingering spirits of the Sage of Six Paths in the Pure Land and Hamura guarding the moon, he couldn't help but wonder. Why did the Otsutsuki clan seem to specialize in producing such cunning schemers? While Kyosuke's battle had concluded, Madara was still locked in combat elsewhere. The monks of the Fire Temple, wielding the power to seal the Nine Tails, were far stronger than they had been during the era of Hidden Leaf Village. The collective might of these aged monks allowed them to fight Madara to a standstill, albeit temporarily. Welcoming approach, thousand-armed murder. A massive thousand-armed cannon manifested behind the monks, its size and power vastly surpassing anything created by Chiriku in later generations. Smash! At the head monk's command, thousands of golden fists rained down at astonishing speed, pummeling Madara's third-stage Susanoo into a defensive retreat. Irritated by the setback, Kyosuke couldn't resist adding fuel to the fire. Can't handle it. Should I take over? Shut up. Madara snapped, seething with frustration. Caught off guard by the monk's ability to jointly unleash a single type of ninjutsu, Madara found himself briefly overwhelmed. Now, Kyosuke's taunts only worsened his mood. With his patience at its limit, Madara formed a seal, his hands moving rapidly in front of his chest. This time, he abandoned all concerns about collateral damage. Activating the power of his right eye, Madara's Susanoo mirrored his sealing gestures. Under the astonished gazes of the monks, a colossal fireball descended from the skies, resembling a meteor streaking through the sky. Fire style, majestic demolisher flame. The fiery mass obliterated the thousand-armed cannon's golden fists with ease. Upon impact, it erupted in a devastating explosion, unleashing an inferno that engulfed everything in its wake. Flames consumed the Grand Fire Temple, reducing its main hall to rubble in an instant, and the surrounding structures stood no chance against the relentless blaze. Centuries of history and tradition crumbled to ash, the temple's once proud legacy erased in moments. Cough, cough. Protected by Susanoo from the searing heat, Kyosuke coughed lightly as he hurriedly escaped the inferno. If not for the sight of a similarly disheveled Madara, Kyosuke might have thought the man had done this on purpose to retaliate against him. While enhancing the power of ninjutsu with Susanoo was undoubtedly effective, the technique's wide area of effect made it nearly impossible to avoid friendly fire. No wonder he always prefers to act alone. Kyosuke muttered, shaking his head with a wry smile. This kind of fighting style really isn't for everyone. As he spoke, the soot-covered Madara approached from a distance, clearly having been just as tormented by the smoke. Cough, cough. Did your monk escape? Madara asked, his sharp gaze briefly flicking to Kyosuke's eyes. So these are the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan he mentioned? Earlier, during a fleeting glance, Madara had indeed sensed the overwhelming power radiating from Kyosuke's enhanced Sharingan. Yes, he's gone. Kyosuke turned his gaze toward the barrier-enclosed rear mountains of the fire temple. There, on an altar, the Night Tails lay trapped within its confines. Chapter 164, Madara vs. Kurama at the fire temple's altar. Roar. Perhaps sensing the approach of danger, beastly roars echoed incessantly from within the altar. As they advanced on foot, Madara Uchiha's brows knitted tightly, his expression shadowed by contemplation. Though his steps remained steady, it was clear his thoughts were elsewhere. After a long silence, he finally broke it, his voice tinged with hesitation. I think using Genjutsu to control it and turning it into a summoning beast might be the better approach. Better, my foot. Hearing this, Kyosuke retorted sharply. Summoning beast? With your sloppy skills, even a basic contract seal left you fumbling. Well, there's no helping it. Madara sighed, raising his head to look at the sky, a reluctant expression crossing his face. It's still better than your suggestion of sealing a tailed beast inside a body. Honestly, what kind of person even thinks of such a method? At this point in time, the concept of a Jinchuriki didn't exist, so Madara struggled to accept Kyosuke's forward-thinking ideas. Kyosuke clicked his tongue disdainfully, thinking to himself, you can't even handle a single-tailed beast now, huh? Yet in the future, when you've got all 9 sealed within you, you sure didn't seem reluctant then. Left with no choice, Kyosuke began to lecture Madara on the benefits of becoming a Jinchuriki. Do you even know how terrifying tailed beast chakra is? It's practically a walking energy reservoir. Not to mention its regenerative abilities. With the Night Tails, you'd no longer have to worry about exhausting your stamina when fighting Hashirama anymore. At those words, Madara's eyebrows arched slightly, the resistance etched across his face softening noticeably. Good grief. So everything boils down to Hashirama, huh? Kyosuke silently complained in his heart. Seeing Madara reluctantly nod in agreement, Kyosuke paused and swallowed the words he intended to say about the Nine Tails chakra mode. That kind of combat style might not align with Madara's personality. Instead, Kyosuke thought it'd be better to add some restrictions to the contract and use Genjutsu to control the Nine Tails, granting Madara the ability to summon it at will. Majestic attire, Susanoo was certainly more powerful than the simple transformations of a Jinchuriki. By placing restrictions on the seal, it would be similar to how Naruto, after unlocking the 8-trigram seal, allowed Kurama to operate independently of his body for short periods. As long as the seal remained intact, Kurama's temporary departure wouldn't cause any issues. For instance, during the battle on the moon against Tonarai, Naruto allowed the Nine Tails to fight separately against Hamura's golem. Of course, the result was Kurama getting pinned down and beaten thoroughly. Snapping out of his thoughts, Kyosuke and Madara found themselves at the massive altar of the fire temple. Thanks to Mito's teachings, Kyosuke's proficiency in sealing techniques has reached an exceptional level. Forming a simple set of hand seals, he raised his fingers and thrust them forcefully into the empty air before him. Sealing technique, release. In an instant, the sky darkened, and storm clouds churned violently, as if heralding the emergence of the mightiest tailed beast. Under the duo's watchful gaze, faint crimson bubbles began rising from the altar's surface. They quickly multiplied, gathering into a thick, boiling pool of what resembled blood. It's finally about to appear. Kyosuke muttered as he raised both hands, ready to seal the Nine Tails before it could fully awaken. Unexpectedly, Madara stepped forward to stop him. The man's eyes were alight with excitement, like a warrior meeting a formidable adversary for the first time. Truthfully, this was Madara's first time seeing the Nine Tails in person, and it far surpassed the terrifying legends he had heard. Before subduing it, he wanted to truly experience its might. Do as you please, Kyosuke said, not bothering to argue further. After all, it was just the Nine Tails. The two of them could easily control it with Genjutsu whenever they wished. In the end, tailed beasts lacked the power to defy the descendants of the Sage of Six Paths. Whether it was them or Hashirama, dealing with a tailed beast was never a strenuous task. Even Obito, newly turned into the masked man, had controlled the Nine Tails with just a glance. Roar. As the two conversed, the dense crimson chakra finally coalesced, forming the fearsome shape of the nine-tailed demon fox. "I'm finally free!" Kurama roared, its voice brimming with exhilaration. Years of imprisonment had filled it with violent rage. The moment it broke free, its first thought was to find the humans who had sealed it and exact its revenge. Suddenly, Kurama noticed the fire temple burning with flames. "What's this? I haven't even done anything yet, and this wretched temple is already in ruins." Kurama muttered in confusion. Only then did it shift its attention to the two humans at its feet. "Hey, was it you who removed the seal?" The enormous fox lowered its head, its icy, vertical pupils staring them down. Even in the face of its liberators, Kurama's attitude remained as cold and unyielding as ever. The only concession was its decision not to kill them outright. Facing those enormous, gleaming eyes, Kyosuke suppressed the urge to strike it down, silently thinking, "You'll soon learn the true cunning of the Uchiha." If Kyosuke harbored such feelings, then Madara, never known for his patience, was even less forgiving. "A mere beast dares to raise its voice at me?" he sneered, his tone dripping with disdain. With a sharp, dismissive snort, an enormous blue light burst forth from Madara's body, piercing the sky like a blazing pillar of power. On the basis of the second form of his Susanoo, the blue construct gained lower limbs and legs. Its size expanded dramatically, and Madara, as the caster, appeared atop its head. Fourth stage of Susanoo. This form, suspended between the second stage and a fully formed Susanoo, struck the perfect balance, maintaining mobility while delivering significantly enhanced power. It was particularly suited for combating massive summoning beasts or formidable foes like the Ninetales, whose overwhelming size was their greatest advantage. As the blue blade of Susanoo took shape, Madara wasted no time. He struck Kurama with an unrelenting force while the beast was still reeling in a daze. Roar! The Ninetales' familiar roar filled the air once more, but this time, it was laced with agony. Driven to madness by the pain, the beast reared its massive head. Chakra surged wildly, forming a pitch-black tailed beast ball in the blink of an eye. Seeing this, Madara's expression finally turned serious. His Mangekyo Sharingan burned brilliantly, flaring to their full power, and his Susanoo began to evolve once more, its form growing even more imposing. Two additional pairs of arms emerged from the Susanoo's back, wielding 6 swords in total. These weapons combined their energy into a devastating attack, a blow so powerful even Kyosuke was momentarily stunned. No wonder he forced Hashirama to bring out his Sage Artwood style, through several thousand hands. Madara's ocular power significantly boosts Susanoo's abilities. Even Kyosuke, with his current abilities, couldn't freely alter the form of his Susanoo. Such modifications were predetermined upon awakening. But in Madara's hands, Susanoo seemed like a mere plaything. One moment forming seals, the next sprouting extra arms. It could be manipulated however he pleased. While Kyosuke pondered this, Madara's strike clashed with a tailed beast ball, unleashing a catastrophic explosion of energy. Using the Flying Thunder God technique, Kyosuke teleported to a safe distance, found a seat, and prepared to enjoy the battle between the two powerhouses. The fully formed Ninetales was immensely powerful, capable of overwhelming all other tailed beasts combined. However, Madara was not a force to be underestimated. With the awakened chakra of Indra and the cells of the sage's body coursing through him, his power had reached monumental heights. In terms of raw power, even if he didn't yet possess a complete Susanoo, he wasn't far behind. With his rich combat experience, this battle promised to be an intense clash between equals. Chapter 165, the first Jinchuriki of the Ninetales in the blink of an eye. The battle had raged on for a long time. On the battlefield, Madara Uchiha had summoned 3 shadow clones. Together with his 4 towering Susanoo figures, they alternated their strikes against the Ninetales, unleashing a relentless onslaught. The scene was nothing short of brutal and tragic. Bayu! 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 The tormented Kurama opened his mouth and unleashed a barrage of tailed beast bombs, shaking the surrounding 10 kilometers with relentless tremors. The intensity of the battle instantly escalated, leaping from a Naruto-level clash to something akin to the early stages of Dragon Ball. Boom! 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 Amidst the deafening explosions, a blazing phoenix with a wingspan exceeding 8 meters soared into the sky. Fire style, Flame of Garuda. This was Madara's most powerful fire style technique, enhanced even further by the might of his Susanoo. The moment it collided with the Ninetales, it triggered an explosion no less devastating than a tailed beast bomb. Hick! In the distance, Kyosuke let out a satisfied burp and casually tossed an empty snack bag aside. Such a lifelike 3D battle spectacle demanded the accompaniment of popcorn and soda for maximum enjoyment. In his idle moments, he had once altered a few of the summoning beasts from Richie Cave. What was originally designed as the snake concealment technique for stealth operations had, in his hands, been cleverly repurposed into a mobile snack storage unit. One had to admit, When it came to finding ingenious ways to relax and savor life, Kyosuke truly had a natural talent. "Lord Kyosuke, if there's nothing else, I'll be heading back now," said the small venomous snake, timidly shrinking its neck fearfully. Clearly, the presence of the Ninetales was overwhelming for it. "All right." Kyosuke didn't trouble it further, waving a hand to dismiss it. "Send my regards to Akikishimaheim and Tagriheim." "Understood." The little snake replied, swaying its head as it spoke. "Lady Tagriheim often talks about you. She says she misses the days of training with you." At these words, a particular image flashed through Kyosuke's mind. Flushed cheeks and a small whip capable of shattering stones and splitting gold. Hey hey hey. Once the summoning beast had left, Kyosuke stood up, cupping his hands around his mouth to amplify his voice as he called out. "Stop messing around. If this drags on any longer, we won't make it back in time." From the smoky battlefield in the distance came what seemed to be a displeased snort. It appeared that Madara Uchiha was not yet entirely satisfied, but Kyosuke was beginning to lose patience. As for Kurama, who had previously been brimming with rage, now cowered like a student who had scored 40 points on a test, shrinking under the gaze of an imposing father, unable to lift his head. His once sharp, icy vertical pupils had morphed into the unmistakable pattern of his opponent's Sharingan. Seeing this, Kyosuke vanished in a flash, appearing on Kurama's back. His right palm was shrouded in black sealing marks, which he forcefully pressed onto the beast's back. 8 trigram sealing style. As the black marking spread endlessly, the Ninetales' body dissolved into a torrent of crimson chakra, pouring relentlessly into Madara's body. For anyone else, this process might have been excruciating. But for Madara, with his immense ocular power, the Ninetales was hardly a challenge. When the dust settled, the enormous red figure of the tailed beast was nowhere to be seen in the forest. Madara lowered his gaze to his palm, his fingers curling slightly as he closed his eyes to sense the changes coursing through him. For a moment, silence enveloped him. Then, the corners of his lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Not too bad," he murmured. As his thoughts shifted, countless red bubbles began to surface on his body, slowly expanding like a sinister, creeping tide. Even with the Ninetales sealed, the Genjutsu cast by the Sharingan remained intact. Thus, he wouldn't face the same kind of berserk transformation that Naruto had experienced. Ignoring Kyosuke's dissatisfaction, Madara formed hand seals with both hands and slammed them onto the ground. Summoning Jutsu. In an instant, the massive figure of the Ninetales reappeared. Thanks to Kyosuke's modifications, Madara could now summon the beast externally while still retaining his status as a Jinchuriki. For any other Jinchuriki, such an act would provoke a tailed beast rampage, with the creature refusing to return to its host. However, for Madara, this wasn't an issue. With the Sharingan's control, the Ninetales lacked any sense of self-awareness. If he so wished, Kurama could even perform a tap dance for the two of them on the spot. Standing atop the massive head of the tailed beast, Madara Uchiha couldn't help but admit that for his current self, this creature was indeed more powerful than his Susanoo. But what if the two could be combined? Suddenly, a peculiar thought surfaced in his mind, quickly taking shape and transforming into a bold, audacious idea. As his Mangekyo Sharingan activated once more, a layer of blue armor gradually enveloped the Ninetales' body. At that moment, Madara's majestic attire Susanoo made its debut, 20 years ahead of schedule. Feeling the overwhelming pressure radiating toward him, Kyosuke twitched the corners of his mouth, wondering if he had gone too far. Although this Madara was far from his peak during the Valley of the End battle, he had already reached a level of strength comparable to the late Warring States period. In terms of combat power, he had practically leaped several levels in an instant, reaching the mid-tier of the Super Kage level. Even at the threshold of this level, he was already beyond the reach of ordinary Kage-level opponents. It was possible that this time, even Senju Hashirama might find himself on the losing end. Impressive, truly impressive. Kyosuke remarked sarcastically, clapping his hands in mock applause. So, clan leader, can we leave now? Mido is still waiting for me to return for dinner. Let's go. Retracting the tailed beast, Madara appeared to be in high spirits. As for gratitude, there was no need for thanks between brothers like him and Kyosuke. Gratitude would have been too formal. Oh, by the way, help Izuna solve his vision issues when you get the chance. Madara added. I've already prepared everything. We can start as soon as he gets back from showing off. Using the Flying Thunder God technique to travel, the two swiftly returned to the clan from the Fire Temple. Watching Madara's departing figure, Kyosuke smiled faintly, feeling no guilt about his actions. Even with the Ninetales, the Dance King's strength was only at the mid-stage of Super Cage level, while Kyosuke had already stabilized himself at this tier, approaching its peak. If a fight broke out, he was confident he could suppress Madara. After all, tailed beasts were merely external forces. The true path lay in evolving the Sharingan and enhancing one's physical constitution, which were the cornerstones of strength and dominance. Once he could freely manipulate yin-yang chakra, he would be on the path to becoming the second sage of 6 paths. When the divine tree bore its chakra fruit, he might even have the chance to reach the heights of Otsutsuki Kaguya. At that point, I might as well take a tour of space myself. With a cryptic smile on his face, Kyosuke pushed open the door, ready to spend the evening with his wife. Snowflakes drifted softly from the sky, blanketing the world in quiet stillness. Draped in a black fox fur cloak, Kyosuke stood alone in the courtyard, his gaze fixed on the distant stars. Another year had passed and he was now a 16-year-old young man. At the same time, Kyosuke was on the verge of stepping into a new chapter of his life. One that would soon bring a vibrant new life into the world. P.S. Damn, he's still a minor. Before long, he would take on the role of a father. To think it's all happening so soon. Knock, knock, knock. The sound of knocking came from the front door as the Uchiha brothers, Madara and Izuna, entered his home one after the other. Hey, I brought a fine bottle of sake today. Let's drink till we drop. Izuna said with a grin, holding up a wine flask. Tonight was New Year's Eve. Kyosuke couldn't bear to let the two single men spend the holiday alone, so he invited them over to celebrate together. Hey, dinner's ready. Come inside already. Came Mido's voice from inside the house. Let's go. Kyosuke smiled, gesturing for them to follow. Such peaceful days brought a sense of genuine happiness. For a moment, Kyosuke found himself caught in an illusion, believing that danger had long since abandoned the Uchiha clan. But alas, an illusion was just that. An illusion. Chapter 166, The Killing Game Ends, Star Release Explodes Moon Base, Tenseigan, Energy Vessel. Wow, so this is the palace you built? Mido exclaimed, heavily pregnant, ran back and forth with enthusiasm. The word princess seemed entirely out of place when describing her demeanor. It's the architecture of the clan of the Hidden Moon Village. By the way, could you slow down a little? Kyosuke let out a resigned sigh, wearing a helpless smile. At this moment, he seriously doubted whether the two of them were truly capable of playing the role of responsible parents. Since the beginning of the year, reports of disturbances at the moon base had been pouring in. Even the elite ninja force under Kyosuke's command had repeatedly failed to apprehend the culprit. On the contrary, the enemy had taken advantage of the situation to massacre numerous moon residents. Even Izumi, the commander-in-chief, had suffered severe injuries and was left on the brink of death. With no other options, Kyosuke decided to take matters into his own hands. The moment Mido learned he was heading to the moon, she immediately clamored to go with him. Her excuse? She claimed she wanted to check if Kyosuke was hiding a mistress on the moon. In truth, she was simply bored at home and longed for a change of scenery. Weighing the safety risks of leaving her alone, Kyosuke eventually relented, reasoning that it would at least spare him from her endless nagging. As Mido wandered through the expansive halls of the palace, Ma Yasun brought Kyosuke the latest news on the attacker. Casually flipping through the documents, he found nothing particularly noteworthy. The attacker's identity, strength, and even age remained unknown. The only valuable piece of information was that the clan had managed to pinpoint the general area where the enemy was hiding. Though the coverage was quite large, with his abilities, searching the area wouldn't be too much of a challenge. You stay with her. I'll be back shortly. With that, Kyosuke disappeared and reappeared within the vast, boundless forest. The sparse population of the Hidden Moon Village clan meant that most of the moon's surface remained undeveloped. As a result, the flora and fauna here rivaled those of the Land of Fire, though traces of living creatures were seldom seen. Well then, let's see your true face, Kyosuke murmured, placing 2 fingers gently on the ground. Thanks to the enhanced perception granted by his intermediate sage body, his sensory abilities were now on par with those of the Senju and Uzumaki clans. Within a mere 10 seconds, he locked onto an area a few kilometers away with unusual energy fluctuations. Using a few simple teleportation jutsus, he quickly arrived at his destination, only to be greeted by the sight of a massive cave. Seriously? It's always caves or altars. Can't they come up with something new? Kyosuke muttered, rolling his eyes as he prepared to send a shadow clone to investigate. The moon was unlike the shinobi world, who knew what traps Otsutsuki Hamura might have left behind. It was better to be cautious. And his choice proved to be the right one. Barely moments after his clone entered the cave, it was obliterated in a thunderous explosion that reduced the entire cavern to rubble. From the clone's transmitted memories, Kyosuke learned that it couldn't even utilize space-time ninjutsu before being caught in the destructive blast. At this point, Kyosuke could no longer remain oblivious. From beginning to end, there had never been a so-called mysterious attacker. This entire situation was a trap specifically designed for him. Other than Black Zetsu, I can't think of anyone else. With a sigh, He closed his eyes and carefully sensed his surroundings. After confirming Mido's safety, Kyosuke breathed a small sigh of relief and then raised his head to look at a white bird circling in the sky. What he saw next surprised him. The oversized white bird bore a striking resemblance to a familiar creation from his memories. Could it be explosive clay? The last thing Kyosuke expected was to encounter a user of explosion style on the moon. Another fool deceived by Black Zetsu. As he prepared to act, a shooting star suddenly streaked across the distant sky. Leaping back instinctively, Kyosuke easily dodged the incoming attack. When he activated his Sharingan, he realized the meteor was not a celestial object but a masked man shrouded in silver radiance. What an unusual ability. Kyosuke frowned slightly and pulled out his weapon from within his black cloak. Before him, a six-pointed star diagram materialized on the ground, forming a peculiar space-time barrier that shimmered with mysterious energy. As a master of the Flying Thunder God technique, Kyosuke immediately recognized it as a unique spatial barrier. Of course. To deal with me, 2 people alone wouldn't suffice. Kyosuke remarked, curious to know who could give Black Zetsu the confidence to act. The answer was soon revealed. Accompanied by soft footsteps, a familiar figure slowly emerged from the six-pointed star, hexagram. It was none other than Hyuga Tenjin, the wielder of the Tenseigan. I didn't expect it to be you. Kyosuke frowned in confusion and asked. May I ask why would the esteemed clan leader Tenjin act in this manner? If Tenjin dared to make a move, he must have some degree of confidence. Sometimes, under certain psychological tendencies, people might unconsciously reveal critical information. Unfortunately, Hyuga Tenjin was too shrewd to fall for this. The moon was founded by my ancestors. You've occupied it by force, and I've come today to demand an explanation. Tenjin declared, his justification flawless. Upon hearing this, Kyosuke ignored his motives and instead questioned the earlier six-pointed star. I don't mind giving you an explanation, but I'm curious. When did you master space-time abilities? Oh, that? Tenjin lightly stomped the ground and gave a straightforward answer. Would you believe me if I said it has nothing to do with me? So, Black Zetsu's doing. Kyosuke nodded, piecing together the overall picture. Whoosh. 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 At that moment, the sound of something swiftly descending from above broke the silence. Shrugging helplessly, Kyosuke shook his head with a wry smile. These people really don't understand courtesy. Indeed. They deserve to die. Tenjin agreed, nodding in approval. It was clear he didn't hold Black Zetsu in high regard. Let me deal with them first. Then we can continue our conversation. Be my guest. Whether he was truly foolish or simply overly confident in his own strength, Tenjin actually stepped aside and waited quietly. Seeing this, Kyosuke wasted no time. Unsealing his curse marks, he instantly entered Sage mode. Transparent snake-like wings sprouted from his back, carrying him swiftly into the sky. Oh, by the way, I forgot to warn you. Hyuga Tenjin's voice echoed faintly. Though I don't care much for them, if you're too careless, you might not live to face me. Before his words faded, the man below had already reached Kyosuke's side. In his outstretched palm, specks of starlight began to gather, forming a terrifying force akin to the destruction of a star. Star-style, dimensional starburst. Boom. The ensuing explosion unleashed a shockwave far more devastating than a tailed beast bomb, engulfing Kyosuke's figure in an instant. Even the clouds in the sky were split apart, a testament to the attack's overwhelming strength. What an extraordinary technique. Hyuga Tenjin's expression remained impassive, as though nothing in the world could disturb his composure. Chapter 167, Yatamura in the left hand, Kusanagi sword in the right. In the shinobi world, within a secret underground cavern in the land of grass. With the assistance of a certain Uzumaki clan member embedded within its body, Black Zetsu finally succeeded in perfecting the long-distance summoning, impure world reincarnation technique. The space-time barrier created by Hyuga Tenjin? That, too, was undoubtedly its handiwork. Ironically, Black Zetsu owed Kyosuke Uchiha some measure of gratitude. Had it not been for Kyosuke's interference, the thought of using impure world reincarnation to augment its own power might never have crossed its mind. More importantly, it might never have uncovered the secret research conducted by Hyuga Yaoi. A discovery that proved invaluable. This time, however, the two individuals summoned through summoning, impure world reincarnation were far from ordinary figures. They were legends who would tip the scales of power in Black Zetsu's favor. One was the legendary creator of explosion style, a figure Black Zetsu had encountered briefly over 3 centuries ago. The other was the originator of Star Release, a terrifying force who had once single-handedly inflicted catastrophic damage upon the entire shinobi sect. It had taken Black Zetsu an arduous amount of time to locate their long-forgotten graves and meticulously execute the summoning, impure world reincarnation technique using their decayed, weathered remains. But, Of course, merely summoning these titans of power wasn't enough to ensure victory. The true trump card would only come into play with the arrival of Hyuga Tenjin. While scouring the shinobi world for the remnants of powerful individuals, Black Zetsu stumbled upon an unexpected discovery. An exceptional summoning, impure world reincarnation body with the potential to elevate Tenjin's power to unprecedented heights. With the Tenseigan nearing its mature stage, its immense capabilities would soon enable it to completely erase Kyosuke Uchiha from existence. Even if it failed, Black Zetsu had contingency plans in place. Either way, it wouldn't be at a loss. No one can stop my plan. Black Zetsu murmured. After so long, I've finally found the right candidates. This time, I will revive Mother no matter what. As it gazed up at the full moon hanging in the night sky, Black Zetsu shed what could only be described as grotesque, oozing tears. How a yin-style-based life form could weep was anyone's guess, but perhaps this peculiar ability was what truly set the shinobi world's greatest filial child apart. On the moon, the fierce battle raged on. The starburst, which erupted in an instant, posed no real threat to Kyosuke. With the Flying Thunder God technique at his command, he effortlessly evaded every attack, moving like a phantom across the battlefield. Hyuga Tenjin, standing calmly on the sidelines, appeared composed. Yet, beneath the surface, his sharp, calculating eyes meticulously tracked the field, committing to memory every location where Kyosuke's space-time coordinates had been marked. At the Super Kage level, teleportation was far from invincible. With precise prediction, one could even reverse the tactic, turning it into a deadly trap. For Tenjin, this was more than a battle. It was an unshakable mission. Kyosuke Uchiha had to die here and now. If he escaped, the Hyuga clan would never know peace. Struggle. Fight. Then drowned in the depths of despair. Tenjin muttered under his breath, his tone dripping with malice. Today, Kyosuke, there will be no escape for you. On the battlefield, Kyosuke, who had returned to the ground, swiftly formed a series of hand seals, his fingers moving with precision before settling in front of his chest. From behind him, shadowy serpents emerged, their jaws gaping wide as they unleashed a torrential sea of infernal flames. Sage art, scorching flames of grief. The blue-green flames twisted and transformed into serpentine forms, writhing with agility and brimming with destructive power. They embodied the essence of Sage Mode techniques. This technique was a unique application of the Sage art, inorganic reincarnation. Simplified yet devastating. Not only could it manipulate the terrain of earth and stone, but it also extended control to the flames themselves, achieving effects comparable to Izuna Uchiha's Kagetsuchi. Yet, facing the might of Kyosuke's Sage technique, his opponent remained unfazed. Calmly, he raised his hands before his chest and formed a peculiar seal. In an instant, countless radiant stars materialized, blooming around his body like a celestial spectacle. To Kyosuke's astonishment, his opponent abandoned all attempts at defense, standing motionless as the fiery serpents closed in on him. Just before being consumed by the flames, the enemy completed the final preparations for his jutsu. With chilling precision, he locked on to Kyosuke from a distance and unleashed a deep, black hole-like surge of energy. Star-style, solitary gamma explosion. Kyosuke's eyes narrowed as he muttered to himself. So you're targeting the moment I attack, leaving no chance for me to teleport? He smirked faintly. You've really studied the weaknesses of the Flying Thunder God well. Through the keen insight of his Sharingan, Kyosuke immediately grasped the overwhelming destructive power of the technique. With Tenjin and his Tenseigan eyeing him hungrily, Kyosuke was unwilling to expend a large amount of ocular power to directly counter the opponent's move. Acting swiftly, he formed intricate hand seals, conjuring a black Flying Thunder God formula in the air before him. The devastating energy wave collided with a seal and, in an instant, was redirected several kilometers away, exploding harmlessly over a distant shoreline. Boom. A few seconds later, a powerful tremor rippled through the area, shaking the very earth. Yet Kyosuke remained unfazed, paying no mind to the aftermath. Instead, he lifted his head, his sharp gaze locking on to the enemy before him. A figure whose damaged body was slowly regenerating. It was then that the realization struck him. His opponent wasn't summoning impure world reincarnation body. Could he have miscalculated? Was this an elaborate trap laid by Obirama Senju? No, that wasn't possible. Obirama lacked the means to orchestrate something of this scale. And there was no way Hyuga Tenjin would willingly divulge information about the moon's secrets. No, the pieces fit only one way. This had to be the handiwork of Black Zetsu. Only the cunning manipulator could engineer such a scenario, and it explained Tenjin's uncharacteristically passive behavior. Are you kidding me? Black Zetsu is dabbling in impure world reincarnation now? Kyosuke muttered, disbelief in his voice. That old schemer must have unearthed the graves of powerful individuals. He mused, piecing things together. It explains these two unfamiliar figures. But how did it overcome the inherent weakness of summoning, impure world reincarnation bodies being weaker than their prime. Kyosuke's sharp intellect swiftly connected the dots. Through Black Zetsu's surveillance, it had likely discovered the existence of Hyuga Yatewei and used her research against him. Great. Did I just dig my own grave? Despite his mild exasperation, Kyosuke wasn't overly concerned. For most ninjas, impure world reincarnation would be a formidable threat. But for someone of his caliber, unless Black Zetsu could summon and summoning, impure world reincarnation Madara, it wouldn't make much of a difference. On Earth, Black Zetsu observed Kyosuke, now surrounded by enemies, through the eyes of its summoning, impure world reincarnation bodies. The reason it could execute such long-range techniques was due to a reincarnated puppet, one skilled in space-time ninjutsu. Not only could this puppet teleport Hyuga Tenjin to the moon, but it could also track Kyosuke's concealed space-time teleportation array, ensuring his every move was monitored. Whether the plan succeeded or failed, it was enough to trap Kyosuke on the moon for a significant time. That window would provide Black Zetsu with more than enough opportunity to move forward with the next stage of its plan. As always, no one could stand in the way of its ultimate goal, the resurrection of its mother. What a pity. You would have made the perfect sacrifice. Black Zetsu murmured, a hint of regret lacing its voice as it observed the unfolding scene through the puppet's perspective. On the battlefield, dark golden energy surged around Kyosuke as he steeled himself. Unwilling to prolong the confrontation any further, he activated the third stage of Susanoo. The spectral armor of the Tang manifested, its towering form exuding power. In its hand, the Kusanagi sword transformed, becoming an even sharper, indestructible blade. This time, however, something new emerged. An additional feature, a circular, dark golden shield that radiated an otherworldly glow. The Yata Mirror. With the already formidable defense of Susanoo now bolstered by the Yata Mirror, Kyosuke finally possessed a truly impenetrable defense. Worthy of its legendary name. Crossing his arms before his chest, Kyosuke's indifferent gaze locked onto the two enemies before him. Beneath his feet, a few small serpents slithered silently into the earth, their presence barely perceptible. That shield. Hyuga Tenjin muttered, his voice tinged with recognition. It looks oddly familiar. His sharp eyes narrowed as he recalled the Yata Mirror, an artifact he knew all too well from his vast knowledge. Left hand holds the unstoppable Kusanagi sword, right hand wields the impenetrable Yata Mirror. Even Tenjin, who now considered himself invincible, couldn't help but draw a sharp breath. He realized with a sinking feeling that, had he faced Kyosuke in his previous state, he wouldn't have stood a chance. As for the two seemingly impressive summoning, impure world reincarnation bodies. Apologies, but apart from slightly draining Kyosuke's chakra, they served no real purpose. Chapter 168, No Strength to Hit, yet claims to be a deadly trap? The sky was filled with swirling explosive clay, the air vibrating with the continuous, dense sound of detonations that seemed to echo endlessly. Fueled by limitless chakra, the destructive power of explosion style was nothing short of jaw-dropping. Unfortunately, before the brilliance of the Yata Mirror, the enemy's techniques were rendered utterly ineffective. It almost felt as though they were deliberately testing his defensive capabilities. Under Black Zetsu's control, the reanimated body began devouring the remaining explosive clay in large gulps. Gradually, its entire form began to glow with an eerie, faint light. So, this is the same style as Deodara. Kyosuke remarked with a faint smile, his tone dripping with amusement. Just lacking a sense of artistry. As he spoke, the reanimated body leapt into the air, its form swelling endlessly like a grotesque balloon. Boom. A terrifying explosion engulfed an area with a radius of 2 kilometers, its destructive power rivaling Kyosuke's lightning style, Kirin. However, when the smoke and dust cleared, the dark golden Susanoo remained unscathed, firmly standing on the ground. Put more effort into it, I can still take more. Kyosuke remarked coolly, slightly turning his head to glance at the star release user, who was eagerly awaiting his chance to strike. As for the explosion-style user, he no longer had the strength to resist. Crack. A small snake erupted from the ground, sinking its fangs into the reanimated body that was slowly regenerating. Black markings spread rapidly, and with a sharp tug, the snake dragged the body underground, sealing it away completely. To counter Tobirama's impure world reincarnation, Kyosuke had specially trained several summoned beasts skilled in sealing techniques. He hadn't expected his first use of this preparation to be against Black Zetsu. Such is the unpredictability of life. As he reflected on this, the other enemy had already closed in behind him. Black Zetsu was fully confident in his chosen ally's strength. After all, this individual was a legend. Someone who had once single-handedly fought against the shinobi sect. It was a pity that Star Release had since been lost to history. Had it survived, the shinobi world would no doubt be even more vibrant today. Let's see if your defenses can hold up this time. Black Zetsu sneered coldly, unleashing the most powerful gamma ray burst of star release. Star style, solo gamma explosion. This time, Kyosuke had the option to use the Flying Thunder God technique to escape, but curiosity got the better of him. He wanted to test the upper limits of Yatamura's defensive power. With a single thought, the golden circular shield shifted instantly, intercepting the gamma burst just in time. Boom. A second, even more terrifying explosion rang out, the shockwaves so strong that they reverberated all the way to the distant Moon Palace. Within the palace, Mido's gaze betrayed a hint of worry, though she refrained from sending anyone to assist. Listen carefully. Guard the Moon Palace with your lives. No one is permitted to leave without authorization. She commanded firmly. Yes, ma'am. She understood better than anyone the extent of Kyosuke's power. Ordinary shinobi had no place in his battles. Rushing in would do more harm than good, potentially even dragging him down. At this moment, her primary task was to prevent enemy ambushes and ensure the safety of herself and her unborn child. Gently caressing her abdomen, Mido smiled softly and whispered reassuringly. Don't worry. Daddy will protect us. The intense tremors lasted for over 10 seconds. The damage caused by star release surpassed that of explosive clay, rivaling the most powerful of Super Kage-level techniques. Yet, despite this overwhelming force, it still failed to breach the Yatamura's defenses. With a few swift strikes of his blade, Kyosuke dismembered the enemy's body, allowing his summoned beasts to seal him away. Then, turning around, he smirked, his eyes settling on Hyuga Tenjin. My apologies. It seems your so-called death trap has failed. It doesn't matter. Tenjin responded calmly. High defense was a good thing. If it were too weak, wouldn't it make the fight boring? They have nothing to do with me. Truthfully, I detest using the dead as tools in battle. Tenjin remarked, forming hand seals and leisurely entering Tenseigan Chakra mode. With a fiery chakra cloak enveloping his body, he slowly ascended into the air. His gaze swept across the battlefield, locking onto more than 20 objects marked with spatial coordinates. A true battle requires undivided focus. Allow me to eliminate these distractions for you. With that, he raised one hand high. A massive green sphere of energy materialized before him, scattering into a dazzling barrage of green projectiles. Whether it was kunai, trees, or rocks, anything bearing a spatial marker was utterly destroyed in the barrage. In Kyosuke's perception, within the range of his teleportation limits, there were no longer any usable spatial coordinates. Slowly lifting his head, Kyosuke fixed his gaze on the proud expression of the Hyuga clan leader. With a calm tone, he remarked. It seems clan leader Tenjin has done his homework. Observing from the sidelines wasn't a waste after all. In response to Kyosuke's sarcasm, Tenjin nodded without hesitation and said earnestly. To make me act this way, even in death, you should feel honored. Looks like you're even more shameless than I thought. You and I are alike in that regard. Tenjin retorted smoothly, not missing a beat. As their verbal sparring continued, countless green energy bullets materialized in the air. Tenjin, too, was eager to test the limits of the Yatamura's defenses. Your defenses are indeed extraordinary, he admitted with a measured tone. Unfortunately, it's just a shield. Only the Hyuga clan's rotation can be considered true, absolute defense. I'll prove that to you. Before Kyosuke could retort, Tenjin acted decisively, cutting him off mid-sentence and showcasing his mastery not only in battle but also in verbal skirmishes by denying him the last word. With a light flick of his wrist, the barrage of projectiles rained down on the dark golden Susanoo. You're trying to exploit gaps in the Yatamura's defense? Kyosuke mused, his voice calm despite the oncoming storm. An interesting idea, but have you underestimated Susanoo's inherent durability? From start to finish, Kyosuke stood with arms crossed, his posture unshaken. The enemy's plan was naive. If it had been that easy, the explosive clay would have worked earlier. Boom. 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 Feeling the tremors beneath his feet, Kyosuke couldn't help but feel a hint of boredom. Still, he knew Black Zetsu wouldn't launch an ambush without substantial backup. That damned Hyuga Tenjin must have a terrifying trump card hidden away. Swish. With inhuman reflexes, Tenjin dove at incredible speed, positioning himself behind the Susanoo. I never underestimated your defenses, he said calmly. The barrage was merely to create an opening for me to approach. And now what? Kyosuke turned slowly, his gaze filled with undisguised mockery. You're about to find out, Tenjin replied coldly. He stepped forward and, without any flashy techniques, struck the Susanoo with a simple palm thrust. Yet the seemingly ordinary attack shattered the Karasun armor instantly, even obliterating the flesh and bones beneath. Were it not for Kyosuke's Zen technique taking effect, he would have suffered direct damage from the strike. The black, mercury-like liquid coalesced into a perfectly black sphere upon leaving his hand, floating silently behind him. More identical spheres appeared. 5 in total. Hovering ominously behind Tenjin. These objects were collectively known as truth-seeking balls. Chapter 169, The Risks of the Truth-Seeking Orb. Creating a truth-seeking orb typically requires one of two advanced methods. The first method involves mastering the chakra of all 7 elements. Yin, Yang, and the 5 elemental natures of fire, water, earth, wind, and lightning, and skillfully combining them through the yin-yang style technique to forge the orb. This approach is extraordinarily difficult. For most individuals, even mastering 2 chakra natures within a lifetime is an unattainable feat, let alone achieving proficiency in all 7. However, this method has distinct advantages. Truth-seeking orbs created through it can be used as versatile combat tools. Even if they are damaged or destroyed in battle, they can be recreated using yin-yang style, provided the user retains mastery over the necessary chakra elements. According to the system's classification, this method requires developing each chakra nature to an advanced level while also mastering the corresponding yin-yang style techniques. At present, Kyosuke is diligently working toward mastering the first method. The second method for creating truth-seeking orbs involves attaining 6 paths sage mode, which requires the chakra of all 9-tailed beasts. Through this process, the creation of truth-seeking orbs occurs automatically. Even a ninja without mastery over all chakra natures can acquire them this way. However, a significant limitation of this method is that once the orbs are destroyed or lost, they cannot be recreated. The most prominent examples of this method are Naruto Uzumaki with the power of Yang, as well as 6 paths Madara and 6 paths Obito. In all 3 cases, once they lost the chakra of the tailed beasts, their ability to create truth-seeking orbs vanished as well. Naruto, in particular, serves as a cautionary example of carelessness. During his climactic battle with Sasuke at the Valley of the End, he used his truth-seeking orbs recklessly, treating them more like expendable tools. By the end of the battle, he was left with only 3 orbs, a significant reduction from his original set. As for the truth-seeking orbs behind Hyuga Tenjin, they likely originate from the chakra supplied by his Tenseigan. This peculiar green energy appears to contain the combined power of yin-yang style and all 5 elemental natures. Without such an explanation, the origin of his truth-seeking orbs remains a mystery. Gazing at the silently floating orbs, Kyosuke's expression turned serious. He repeatedly reminded himself not to let them come into contact with his body under any circumstances. No wonder he dares to boast about killing me, he muttered to himself. It seems this is the source of his confidence. The truth-seeking orbs, imbued with the power of yin-yang style and the 5 elements, possess strength that far surpasses even Kekkei Genkai and Kekkei Toda. The user can manipulate them freely with their will, rendering all elemental jutsu ineffective. Even summoning, impure world reincarnation bodies, which are infamous for their regenerative capabilities, cannot recover from the damage inflicted by these orbs. Their destructive potential is staggering, capable of obliterating entire forests with ease. Moreover, they can transform into a variety of weapons, offering unparalleled versatility in battle. However, despite their immense power, they are not without limitations. The first weakness lies in their range. The truth-seeking orbs have an effective radius of approximately 70 meters. If they exceed this distance, they will either hover in place or return to the user automatically. The second and more critical limitation is their vulnerability to natural energy, senjutsu. Truth-seeking orbs are unable to withstand attacks infused with sage techniques, which can decisively destroy them. In other words, despite their fierce power, these black spheres are not invincible when faced with the right opponent. Fortunately, as one of the few strong individuals who had mastered sage mode, Kyosuke held a distinct advantage over Hyuga Tenjin. The real challenge, however, lay in timing. Without the perfect opportunity, striking a decisive blow against such a vigilant and powerful opponent would be nearly impossible. Gripping the Kusanagi sword tightly, Kyosuke felt an old, familiar restlessness stirring within him. A primal thrill born from facing a truly formidable foe. A life-or-death struggle. He murmured, his voice low but resolute. That's what real combat is all about. A faint, chilling smile tugged at the corners of his lips. In an instant, his figure blurred before multiplying into countless afterimages, surrounding Tenjin in an intricate, ever-shifting formation. Shizue-style teleportation jutsu. But this wasn't the technique of old. Under Kyosuke's mastery, it had evolved into something far beyond its original design. More than 30 vivid afterimages danced through the air, moving with blinding speed and disorienting precision. Even with his unparalleled vision, Hyuga Tenjin could only vaguely track Kyosuke's movements, his Tenseigan flickering with concentrated effort. A remarkable speed indeed. Tenjin remarked, his voice calm yet edged with a trace of admiration. But unfortunately for you, flaunting such tricks in front of me is a grave mistake. With a deliberate step forward, Tenjin lowered his center of gravity, his arms extending outward like the wings of an eagle preparing to strike. A massive 5 elements 8 trigrams array erupted around him, engulfing the battlefield in a luminous, oppressive glow. 8 trigrams 128 palms. In the blink of an eye, a storm of palm strikes flooded the air, each strike precise and imbued with immense chakra. Was it necessary to distinguish which was Kyosuke's true body? Not at all. Hyuga Tenjin had no interest in such trivialities. He would annihilate all of them with his gentle fist. Within the domain of the 8 trigrams array, Tenjin's sensory abilities were heightened to an extraordinary level. Movements imperceptible to the naked eye now unfolded before him as clear and predictable trajectories. 1 palm, 2 palms, 16 palms, 32 palms. The barrage of strikes was as swift and relentless as a storm, leaving no openings and no hope for escape. To make matters worse, Tenjin's hands were enveloped in an ominous black substance that flowed like liquid. A manifestation of the truth-seeking orb's energy. Even a single touch from these hands would spell certain death for any opponent below the level of 6 paths sage mode. Where do you think you're going? Tenjin's voice was sharp and cold, his eyes radiating merciless intent. His piercing gaze seemed to cut through Kyosuke's after-images, locking onto his prey with unwavering precision. Kyosuke was cornered. With no flying thunder god mark to teleport to, escape was impossible. I'll kill him first. Tenjin thought, his resolve unwavering. Then I'll deal with Madara Uchiha. A minor setback means nothing. I, Hyuga Tenjin, am destined to rule the land of fire. Empowered by his chakra mode and the reinforcing effects of his 8 trigrams domain, Tenjin accelerated with terrifying speed. His movements blurred as he closed the distance, the sharp glint of panic in Kyosuke's eyes reflecting his inevitable fate. With a cold smile, Tenjin thrust his palm forward, aiming directly for Kyosuke's chest. It's over. Tenjin declared, his voice calm yet final. A deafening burst of force followed, rippling outward from the strike. The sheer impact was enough to fracture the ground beneath them. Tenjin was certain that Kyosuke's bones would shatter, his body reduced to nothing but a lifeless heap. But just as his hand was about to land, it stopped. Mere inches from Kyosuke's chest. No matter how much strength he poured into his arm, it wouldn't move further. It was as if an unseen force had seized him, halting the killing blow at the last possible moment. Dujutsu, end. Activate. In that instant, Kyosuke's expression shifted into one of cunning triumph, a look that resembled a seasoned con artist reveling in a perfectly executed ploy. His calm, confident smile carried a hint of glee, as though savoring the moment his prey fell into his trap. At the critical moment, however, Tenjin responded with the precision of a seasoned warrior. A second truth-seeking orb expanded into a black membrane, shielding his body, while the remaining 3 orbs shot toward Kyosuke with terrifying speed, forcing him to abandon his forward strike. Such futile resistance. Kyosuke said, a mocking smile playing on his lips. His right eye flared brightly with an eerie glow, his dujutsu exerting its absolute authority over the battlefield. The truth-seeking orbs, indestructible to most, were, in the end, lifeless objects. Against the overwhelming power of his Mengekyo Sharingan, they were no different from puppets, subject to his control. Reversal. Under Tenjin's astonished gaze, the 4 truth-seeking orbs halted mid-flight before abruptly reversing their trajectory. One after another, they shot back toward their original master with deadly precision. Tenjin's face contorted with shock as the orbs raced toward him, but he had no time to react. In the same instant, the Kusanagi sword thrust forward, piercing cleanly through his chest. Impressive reflexes. Kyosuke murmured, his voice low but laced with mock praise. The strike, aimed at Tenjin's heart, was narrowly deflected by the Hyuga's quick reaction, sparing him from instant death. Even so, the blade struck deep, and lightning chakra surged through its length, crackling fiercely as it tore through flesh and muscle. The truth was simple, sage techniques weren't the only counter to the truth-seeking orbs. Advanced Mangekyo Sharingan abilities, such as Kamyu or Kyosuke's time reversal, could also neutralize the black spheres. Without this decisive advantage, Kyosuke would never have dared to engage Hyuga Tenjin at close range. Coughing up blood, Tenjin staggered but refused to fall. His eyes burned with unrelenting fury as he summoned his remaining strength. You dare! Tenjin roared, his voice reverberating like thunder across the battlefield. A sphere of brilliant green energy erupted from Tenjin's body, expanding outward like a tidal wave of destruction. The ground quaked beneath its unrelenting force, trees splintered into fragments, and the air itself seemed to ripple as the energy consumed the surrounding 10 meters. Die! Boom! The ground shuddered violently under the impact, the deafening explosion a testament to the sheer destructive power unleashed. Smoke and debris filled the air, obscuring the battlefield momentarily. Emerging from the chaos, Tenjin clutched the wound just below his left chest, blood staining his once pristine robes. His Tenseigan burned with fury, veins pulsing visibly around his temples. The pain only served to fuel his anger, which now seethed like a storm within him. Kyosuke. Tenjin's voice was low and venomous, every syllable dripping with murderous intent. He resolved to go on the offensive, determined to overwhelm his opponent with unrelenting attacks. From the brief exchange earlier, he had pieced together the essence of Kyosuke's Mangekyo Sharingan ability. Though formidable, it wasn't without limits. Tenjin smirked coldly, confidence surging through him. The same trick won't work on me again. Ultimately, Tenjin knew his strength eclipsed Kyosuke's. He could afford missteps and failures, but his opponent couldn't afford even a single mistake. A single error would spell his end. The battlefield was bathed in an ominous, dark golden glow. The light pierced through the smoke and debris, radiating an overwhelming sense of power and authority. Consider yourself fortunate, Hyuga Tenjin. Kyosuke's voice cut through the air, calm yet filled with a chilling intensity. You are the first to witness my fully perfect Susanoo. As his words echoed across the battlefield, the dark golden glow coalesced into an enormous, towering figure. It took form gradually, its sheer size dwarfing everything around it. Chapter 170, The Emergence of the Perfect Susanoo. On the surface of the moon, a streak of dark golden light tore through the desolate sky, illuminating the barren terrain like a divine omen. The light surged with unrestrained power, its brilliance awe-inspiring and terrifying, as though an ancient god had awakened from an eternal slumber. The immense chakra radiating from this phenomenon spread like a tidal wave, rippling across the battlefield. Even from afar, Hyuga Tenjin felt its oppressive force pressing down on him. His expression, normally composed, twisted into one of disbelief and dread. How is it possible for him to possess such terrifying ocular power? Tenjin's voice trembled, a rare crack in his otherwise unshakable confidence. Within the ranks of the Tenseigan Mu Uchiha, a heavy silence enveloped the group. All eyes were fixed on the horizon, where a colossal figure began to take shape. The silhouette was unmistakable. The dark golden light coalesced into the form of a Susanoo, its overwhelming presence igniting a mixture of awe and fear among the Uchiha. That's Lord Kyosuke's Susanoo. Someone whispered, their voice laced with disbelief. But this wasn't the same Susanoo they had known. Its sheer size, radiance, and energy were unlike anything they had ever witnessed. Lady Mido. Ma Uchiha spoke hesitantly, the weight of the moment clear in her voice. Despite the distance, she could feel the immense power radiating from the Susanoo, pressing heavily against her chest. Have you ever seen Lord Kyosuke in this form before? Mido's gaze remained fixed on the giant figure on the horizon. Her expression was calm, yet her eyes burned with an uncontainable pride. She raised her hand to adjust the two buns on her head, a subtle gesture masking the rapid beat of her heart. This is my first time as well. Mido admitted softly, her voice carrying both awe and certainty. Her lips curled into a faint smile, and her sharp eyes gleamed with a pride that refused to be hidden. Even though the situation was perilous, with Kyosuke locked in a battle that was far from over, she couldn't suppress the swell of emotion in her chest. You truly are the strongest, she thought to herself, her heart swelling with unshakable belief. No matter the past, the present, or even the future. Suddenly, a shout pierced the silence, drawing her attention back to reality. Look! The giant is transforming again. The exclamation, filled with a mix of excitement and terror, rippled through the ranks. Mido turned her gaze back to the colossal Susanoo. At its core, the dark golden giant pulsed with new energy, its form shifting once more. As the light dimmed slightly, revealing intricate details, she saw it. A layer of dark golden Tengu armor began materializing over its massive frame. The armor's edges glinted with an otherworldly brilliance, each curve and joint radiating dominance and invincibility. This wasn't merely a Susanoo. This was the true form of the perfect Susanoo. The sight sent chills down the spines of all who witnessed it, ally and foe alike. For Mido, however, there was no fear. Only pride. On the battlefield, Kyosuke stood with his arms crossed over his chest, exuding an air of unshakable confidence. His figure was enclosed within the rhombus-shaped crystal perched on the forehead of his perfect Susanoo. Clad in its menacing Tang armor, the perfect Susanoo had grown to an imposing height of over 120 meters. The size and power of a perfect Susanoo varied greatly depending on the user's ocular strength and chakra reserves. For most wielders, even achieving the basic version of the perfect Susanoo resulted in a construct only slightly larger than the mature Tentail's eye. However, at its pinnacle, as demonstrated by Otsutsuki Hagoromo, the Sage of Six Paths, the perfect Susanoo reached a size nearly equal to the Tentails itself, a testament to the sage's unparalleled mastery. Though Kyosuke had not yet reached such heights, his current power was more than enough to contend with the foe standing before him. The perfect Susanoo, in its ultimate stage, was known as the true Susanoo. This state represented a form of ultimate chakra stability, achievable only by those whose ocular power far surpassed that of the average Mangekyo Sharingan user. When cloaked in its iconic Tang armor, the construct's appearance took on the visage of a fearsome samurai. A high nose, sharp, angular features, and a gaze that radiated malice and dominance. Its massive sword, shimmering with chakra, seemed to pulsate with latent destruction. A simple swing of the sword could carve through mountains, tear apart rivers, and obliterate miles of land in an instant. This overwhelming force made the perfect Susanoo the embodiment of destruction itself. Anyone capable of activating the perfect Susanoo could unleash destructive power at the mid-tier Super Kage level. However, to transcend this stage, one needs to either enhance their ocular power or add unique elements to the Susanoo, pushing it to its absolute limits. Madara Uchiha, for instance, utilized the Nine-Tails chakra to create his majestic attire Susanoo, a form that far surpassed the standard perfect Susanoo in both size and destructive potential. As for Kyosuke, the cursed mark on his shoulder began to dissolve. This dissolution released an immense surge of Senjutsu chakra, flowing outward with a vitality all its own. It merged seamlessly with his massive Susanoo, turning his body into a conduit for its immense energy. The already imposing Tengu armor that adorned the Susanoo began to glow with an intense, fiery serpentine aura, as if the very flames of creation were coursing through it. Behind the towering figure, a massive serpent's shadow coiled and hovered, its slow movements blending seamlessly with the Tengu armor's domineering presence. The combined force of these two elements, the Senjutsu chakra and the Susanoo, made Kyosuke form a force of nature. The enemy in the distance, Hyuga Tenjin, could only stare in wide-eyed disbelief, his face drained of color as he saw the sheer power of the being before him. Sage Art, Susanoo. This was Kyosuke's strongest form yet, standing at the very peak of mid-tier Super Kage level power. A truly formidable sight to behold. Kyosuke exhaled deeply as the vast energy finally settled within him. His gaze lowered to the ground, where Hyuga Tenjin now appeared insignificant in comparison, almost like a mere ant beneath the towering figure of his Susanoo. Kyosuke let out a satisfied sigh, his voice carrying an air of calm control. This is much better. I've never been fond of looking up to others. Boom. Controlling the Susanoo to take a single step forward caused the ground to quake violently, the earth itself trembling under the sheer weight of its movement. Hyuga Tenjin, who was barely the size of the Susanoo's foot, could do little but channel chakra into his feet to steady himself, his body nearly toppled by the overwhelming force. His eyes narrowed, but there was no denying the unease rising within him. Don't get too full of yourself, brat. Tenjin sneered, lifting himself into the air with a swift leap. His expression, though battered, remained full of disdain. My truth-seeking orbs can obliterate anything. That thing is nothing but an oversized target. His words were defiant but lacked conviction. More an attempt to convince himself than to intimidate his opponent. Despite the bravado in his voice, Tenjin's heart raced with growing dread. The stronger one became, the more attuned they became to the presence of the Sage Art Perfect Susanoo. Its immense chakra resonated like a deep, overwhelming pressure that made everything around it feel insignificant. He couldn't understand. How could someone barely 15 or 16 years old refine their chakra to such an overwhelming degree? Obliterate everything? Kyosuke's voice rang out, a derisive laugh escaping him. His gaze deliberately swept over the wound on Tenjin's chest, his lips curling into a mockingly amused grin. So powerful, yet you still let me stab you, huh? Taking in a deep breath of the crisp, high-altitude air, Kyosuke's eternal Mangekyo Sharingan flared with a crimson light as he grinned. The Susanoo moved with an air of quiet menace, its colossal hand reaching down to rest on the hilt of the sword at its waist. Just as before, the Kusanagi sword was fully manifested in this form. With this weapon, the perfect Susanoo's attacks would carry unimaginable power, capable of decimating entire landscapes with a single slash. It's coming. Hyuga Tenjin's voice rose in urgency as he retreated slightly, hastily positioning 5 truth-seeking orbs around him to form a protective sphere. He neither dodged nor flinched, his confidence seemingly unshakable. But within seconds, that confidence shattered. The chakra of the perfect Susanoo was now more stable and refined than ever before, allowing Kyosuke to channel his full swordsmanship into the weapon. This was the moment he had been preparing for. Every practice session, every refinement of his skills, and the claiming of the Kusanagi sword had all been for this singular day. A sharp, metallic sound rang out in the air as the colossal Susanoo's sword, over 60 meters long, was drawn. The mere motion sent a massive shockwave hurtling forward, devastating everything in its path. Dominating blade, divine judgment prison. Under the power of Senjutsu chakra, the barrier formed by the truth-seeking orbs shattered in less than 2 seconds. In Tenjin's disbelieving eyes, the blade's shockwave swallowed him whole, its energy sweeping through the land with unstoppable force. Far in the distance, 2 mountains collapsed under the residual power of the attack, their peaks shattered into debris as shockwaves rippled across the lunar surface. At the distant moon palace, countless shinobi stood frozen in shock, gaping at the devastation. Their faces reflected sheer disbelief as they stared at the towering Susanoo and the annihilated landscape miles away. This is the power of a god. As the saying goes, God's grace is vast, but his wrath is boundless. To everyone watching as Kyosuke cleaved mountains with a single strike, he was nothing short of a deity. No less than a god. Aside from a handful of exceptional shinobi, anyone below mid-tier Super Kage level would undoubtedly perish if struck by this blade. Suspended 100 meters in the air, Kyosuke surveyed the transformed landscape beneath him, the damage wrought by his blow almost surreal in its scale. After a long moment of silence, he suddenly threw back his head and let out an unrestrained laugh that reverberated through the shattered sky. Ha 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 ha. The laughter was wild, triumphant, and tinged with a faint trace of madness. Finally, I've reached this level. Behind him, the dark golden wings of his colossal Susanoo unfurled. In the next moment, the 100-meter-tall giant soared into the sky, savoring the most precious gift in the world, freedom. Piercing through the cloud layer, he soared unchallenged, ignoring the violent thunderstorms that raged around him. His eyes locked onto the distant blue planet hanging in the endless expanse of space. Earth. So, how far is the moon from Earth again? His mind raced as a figure surfaced in his memory. 384,400 kilometers. Humphrey. Just a mere few 100,000 kilometers. He smirked, his lips curling slightly as he quickly abandoned the idea of flying back to Earth directly. With a forceful flap of Susanoo's wings, he reversed direction, returning to the surface of the moon. The colossal figure descended with the weight of a mountain, the ground trembling beneath its landing. Kyosuke's cold gaze fell upon Hyuga Tenjin, whose broken body now lay motionless and powerless on the ground. Is this the end? Chapter 171, The Fall of Tenjin. The destroyed spatial passage. Hyuga Tenjin had been defeated. In truth, with his strength, he could have continued his battle against Kyosuke. Even though Kyosuke had activated his complete Sage mode, defeating Tenjin in his current state was no easy feat. The reason for Tenjin's defeat lay in his blind arrogance and overconfidence in the truth-seeking orbs. Of course, Kyosuke's meticulous scheming also played a significant role. In shinobi battles, intelligence gathering is of the utmost importance. Had Tenjin known in advance that sage arts could counter the truth-seeking orbs, he would never have foolishly chosen to face them head-on. Supporting his body with his remaining arm, Tenjin barely managed to lift his head. His gaze, directed at the young man before him, was filled with unwillingness and regret. He hated his enemy and hated himself even more. Tenjin couldn't understand why Kyosuke's power had surged so dramatically. Had he known this would happen, he would never have agreed to Black Zetsu's conditions. At the same time, he hated his own inadequacies. If he had pushed his Tenseigan to its ultimate form, how could he have possibly lost to a mere fledgling? No matter. He thought. The Hyuga clan still has Yaoi. She will assist the child I've just brought into this world, and with her pair of Tenseigan capable of autonomous evolution, they will one day stand at the pinnacle of the shinobi world. One day, the land of fire will belong to the Hyuga. Feeling his life force rapidly slipping away, Tenjin steeled his resolve, made a ruthless decision, and raised his hand toward his own eyes. No matter what, he could not allow the Tenseigan to fall into his enemy's hands. It would be tantamount to aiding his adversary. If he had to part with them, it would be better to destroy these eyes with his own hand and let his foe do so. Sensing Tenjin's intent, Kyosuke dispelled his perfect Susanoo and leisurely descended from the air. Do you still think the situation is under your control? My spoils of war aren't something you can destroy at will. Crack. Amidst the pool of blood, a faint sound of breaking echoed, followed by the emergence of a small snake from the ground. It opened its jaws and bit down on Tenjin's neck. The curse mark activated, and under the binding of black imprints, even blinking became an arduous task for Tenjin. You. Landing steadily on the ground, Kyosuke rolled his eyes and said. Stop with the stammering. You're a grown man, can't you see where this is headed? I've defeated you. These Tenseigan eyes are my spoils of war. What you just did qualifies as destroying someone else's property. Approaching the fallen man, Kyosuke fell silent for a moment before asking. Any last words? The fall of a hero carries an unspeakable melancholy. In Kyosuke's mind, Hyuga Tenjin had been an adversary even more formidable than Tajima Uchiha or Senju Batsuma. Yaoi possessed both exceptional strength and unparalleled resolve, yet she had been utterly suppressed by Tenjin, to the point that she dared not make a single reckless move. Had it not been for Hashirama's inexplicable surge in strength, there was a real chance the Hyuga could have waged a war of annihilation against the Senju. Now that the victor had been decided, Kyosuke chose to grant Tenjin a final moment of dignity. Last words? Tenjin's spirit seemed to waver. As his strength waned, a montage of past memories flashed before his eyes. After a long silence, he heaved a deep sigh and spoke softly. I've lived my life unrivaled, rarely meeting my match in the shinobi world, only to fall at the height of my glory to your hands. Now, as death approaches, there is little left to cling to. However, I can offer you some information in exchange for 10 years of peace for the Hyuga clan. How about it? Hearing this, Kyosuke pretended to consider for a moment before nodding in agreement. With this man's death, the Hyuga would fall under Yaoi's leadership. Without needing any reminders from Tenjin, Kyosuke had no intention of targeting the Hyuga clan further. Seeing Kyosuke's agreement, Tenjin smiled faintly, and it seemed as though his spirit was momentarily rejuvenated. He then proceeded to detail Black Zetsu's plans, emphasizing the latter's scheme to sever the spatial passage. As Kyosuke's expression darkened, Tenjin shook his head and murmured, "If you act quickly, perhaps, you might still." System prompt, you have successfully killed Hyuga Tenjin. Earned 63,350 points. When Kyosuke came back to his senses, the man before him had already breathed his last. A once-dominant figure had fallen. Over 60,000 points. A fitting reward for a Super Kage-level powerhouse. Retrieving a glass container from his ninja pouch, Kyosuke carefully sealed the Tenseigan from Tenjin's corpse inside it. With everything in order, Kyosuke turned and left without a backward glance, heading toward the space passageway's barrier. Amidst the scarred and battered earth, Hyuga Tenjin's body was gradually consumed by the encroaching sands and wind. Soon, Kyosuke arrived at the spatial passage left behind by Otsutsuki Hamura. As it turned out, Tenjin had not deceived him. The passage had indeed been destroyed by some method employed by Black Zetsu. Damn it! In that moment, the thrill of victory vanished entirely. Kyosuke could not bear the thought of being trapped on the moon for the rest of his life. The vast distance between the two celestial bodies was staggering. Even with his expertise in space-time ninjutsu, traversing the entirety of the Land of Fire was challenging enough, let alone crossing hundreds of thousands of kilometers of cosmic space. After all, the Flying Thunder God technique was not designed for long-distance travel. Sitting alone in a cave, Kyosuke furrowed his brow and began analyzing the destroyed spatial passage. Hours passed, and by the time half a day had gone by, Kyosuke was forced to admit that his talent in spatial ninjutsu was mediocre at best. Forget repair. He couldn't even comprehend the principles behind Hamura's construction of the passage. As for the Flying Thunder God technique, even at its maximum level of 10, it was incapable of spanning the vast cosmic distance back to Earth. I'll have to consider other options. Opening the system menu, Kyosuke glanced at his current points, 78,430, the amount wasn't much, a significant portion had been spent earlier to exchange for the one's own life reincarnation technique, leaving him far from the threshold of 100,000 points. This meant Kyosuke couldn't redeem abilities capable of long-distance spatial travel. Yamatsu Hirasaka, Underworld Slope Hill, Level, SS. Redemption cost, 100,000 points. In less than an instant, appear at the gates of the underworld. This description perfectly encapsulated Yamatsu Hirasaka. Among the existing space-time ninjutsu, it ranked at the very top. Whether for long-distance travel or combat support, its capabilities far exceeded the Flying Thunder God technique. When activated, it would open a black portal capable of instantaneously transporting the user from point A to point B. The size of the portal could also be freely controlled. With a simple stretch of the hand, one could reach a distant enemy. Aside from the Amanomanica, heavenly governing inside, granted by Kaguya's Rin Sharingan, Yamatsu Hirasaka was the most powerful space-time ability Kyosuke knew of. The problem was, he lacked enough points to redeem it. Even worse, the strong members of the Hidden Moon Village clan had already been eliminated, leaving no viable targets for earning more points. What could he do? Attack his own allies? Redeeming the Otsutsuki's unique Karma Seal could also grant spatial abilities, but its exorbitant cost of 150,000 points made it an even more unattainable option. Forget it. I'll just have to take things one step at a time. Chapter 172, Madara attends Hashirama's wedding. In the end, Mito and the others inevitably received the unfortunate news. So, there's no way back, huh? For a brief moment, the aging face of her father surfaced in her mind. Shaking her head slightly, the twin buns atop her head swayed as Mito approached her husband. Gently, she pulled him into her embrace. It's all right. If we can't return, then so be it. As long as you're with me, anywhere feels like home. Hearing her words, Kyosuke smiled silently. Of course, they still had to think of a solution, but life needed to go on. Fortunately, the moon base was fully developed, with everything they could possibly need. Over the years, even chickens, ducks, cattle, and geese had been successfully bred artificially. If population size wasn't taken into account, it didn't seem all that different from the shinobi world. Time flew by, and months passed in the blink of an eye. Kyosuke and the others gradually adapted to life on the moon. Meanwhile, their disappearance was finally noticed by their clan. Find them. Find them at all costs. Madara Uchiha, rarely seen in a rage, was visibly furious. He knew Kyosuke's temperament well, vanishing for a month or so wasn't worth panicking over. However, this time, Mido had disappeared along with him. That was unusual. After all, Mido was currently pregnant. Even if they went out for leisure, there was no way they would be completely out of contact for several months. At this thought, Madara immediately dispatched someone to summon Kaku Uchiha, who had just returned from a mission. As one of Kyosuke's most trusted subordinates, perhaps she might know something. Before long, Kaku Uchiha arrived at the clan's council hall, still unaware of the situation. "Why have you summoned me?" It was only after Madara explained the situation that she realized something was amiss. "The Lord is missing?" The cheerful smile on her face instantly vanished. Without another word, Kaku turned and left. She quickly sought out Kyosuke's top-secret operative, number 1, and learned about the Lord's last known location from him. In addition to that, she also received an extremely unsettling piece of information: the portal connecting to the moon base had malfunctioned. After a brief internal struggle, Kaku decided to report back to the clan leader. The situation was too unusual. It was no longer a matter of keeping information confidential. The moon? Upon hearing her description, Madara wore an expression as though he were listening to a mythical tale. But upon careful thought, Madara vaguely recalled Kyosuke mentioning something similar in the past. At the time, he hadn't paid much attention, nor did he think there was anything extraordinary about traveling to the moon. After all, hadn't the Hyuga clan's Tenjin already? Wait. Hyuga Tenjin? In an instant, Madara recalled the concerns expressed by Hyuga Yaoi during her recent surgery some time ago. Glancing at Kaku Uchiha before him, Madara hesitated briefly before sharing what he knew about the Hyuga girl connected to Kyosuke. She must know something. Without waiting for further instruction, Kaku Uchiha immediately turned and left. No matter what, she had to find the girl. That person might hold some key information. Sigh. After Kaku left, Madara heaved a deep sigh. Rising from his seat, he walked to the window and gazed at the endless expanse of the desolate starry sky. He wasn't worried about Kyosuke's safety. That guy had so many trump cards that no one could figure them out. Even if Hyuga Tenjin dared to act against him, it would likely end in failure. If he couldn't defeat Hashirama, there was no way he could take down Kyosuke. The real problem lay in the fact that the bastard probably wouldn't return anytime soon. The shinobi world was in turmoil. With their decisive victory over the Hyuga, the Senju clan's ambitions were beginning to grow. Rumor had it that Hashirama was planning to marry another daughter of Uzumaki Ashina. The implications of such an alliance were worth scrutinizing, especially with the Hyuga clan's significant shift in stance and attitude. If Tenjin truly acted, the alliance between their clans would effectively be nullified. Unknowingly, the pressure seemed to shift back onto the Uchiha clan. With you gone, the clan is left for me to protect alone. After a brief inner struggle, Madara made his decision. The Senju were at their peak, riding the wave of their triumph over the Hyuga. They were inviting all the clans of the Land of Fire to attend Hashirama's wedding. It was a meticulously crafted move to isolate and weaken the Uchiha. If left unchecked, all their previous efforts might be rendered meaningless. For the sake of the clan and the delicate balance Kyosuke had worked so hard to establish, Madara knew he had to act. As a former friend, you wouldn't refuse my attendance at your wedding, would you, Hashirama? Subconsciously, Madara's hand moved to his abdomen, where the 9 tails lay dormant as ever. This time, it was his turn to demonstrate his strength to the world. For the clan, for his friend. For war, and for peace. Wait for me, Hashirama. Meanwhile, on the moon base. Shizuka Uchiha, Takeshi Uchiha, Nobita Uchiha. No? Then how about Oda Uchiha, Kishimoto Uchiha, Akira Uchiha? The young couple sat in their room, earnestly deliberating over names for their child. However, Kyosuke's suggestions were quickly vetoed one after another by his wife, Mido, who sported her signature twin buns. You're terrible at naming, honestly. Mido said, her face full of disdain. Names like Shizuka and Nobita didn't appeal to her at all, they sounded strange to her ears. In the end, Mido proposed what she believed to be a perfect name, Shuuchiha. Due to their differing opinions, the first family meeting ended in failure. With nothing else to do, Kyosuke found himself once again contemplating a certain idea. Navigating his way to the Forbidden Cave, he wanted to see if his greatly enhanced ocular powers might allow him to establish communication with Kaguya. If he succeeded, not only could he gather information, but he might also learn something about spatial abilities from the goddess herself. According to the original accounts, the Otsutsuki were a clan-based society, almost devoid of technological civilization. Traveling to other planets was a skill inherent to each clan member, who were naturally proficient in spatial manipulation. Kyosuke even speculated that Momoshiki and Kinshiki might already be on their way to Earth. The journey, however, could take decades due to the vast distance. Driven by curiosity about the Otsutsuki, Kyosuke delved deeper into the cave. Unfortunately, the results were the same as before. He could sense the boundless, galaxy-like chakra, but establishing communication with Kaguya remained impossible. Well, desperate times call for desperate measures, he muttered. With a hopeful heart, Kyosuke activated his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. In the next instant, his surroundings shifted. The rocky cave vanished, replaced by an overwhelming, suffocating chakra seemed to loom mere steps away. Turning his head stiffly, Kyosuke's gaze met a pair of pure white, spotless eyes. So, nice to meet you. He stammered awkwardly. The woman before him, the rabbit goddess Otsutsuki Kaguya, bound by countless seals and inscriptions, silently stared at him with her Byakugan, unblinking. Her gaze was so intense that Kyosuke felt a little embarrassed. What the heck, I'm a married man and have family, you know. He muttered under his breath. The word family seemed to stir something within Kaguya. After millennia of solitude, she finally opened her mouth and spoke. You are Black Zetsu's accomplice. Wait. Huh? Kyosuke's eyes darted around nervously. It seemed the goddess had misunderstood something. Chapter 173, Beyond the Six Paths? The lonely and desolate Kaguya. In the blink of an eye, several months passed. As Mido's belly grew larger day by day, Kyosuke fully prepared himself to welcome the arrival of new life. His excitement was palpable, and the warmth of anticipation filled their home. Skilled medical ninjas conducted thorough examinations and confirmed the baby's gender. It was a boy. This joyful revelation allowed the couple to finalize the name they had prepared in advance. Haruto Uchiha. Kyosuke decided on this name through a playful draw of lots. Ever the doting father, he placed a hand on Mido's belly and asked the unborn child. What do you think, little one? Is this name to your liking? Since there was no objection, the matter was settled with a laugh. Aside from supporting his wife and delving into his study of ninjutsu, Kyosuke had another significant responsibility, that was to console a lonely, empty-hearted woman. At first, Mido, with her signature bun hairstyle, couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. The thought of her husband offering comfort to another woman stirred a mix of emotions within her. But Kyosuke, persistent and sincere, appealed to her empathy. As a woman, haven't you ever felt lonely, empty, or cold at some point in your life? He asked. He continued, his tone filled with quiet sadness. Think about it. A mother, sealed away by her sons, trapped for 1,000 years without release. How tragic is that? Moved by his words, Mido's resistance softened. After careful consideration, she chose to stand by what Kyosuke called the correct path. Of course, Mido's magnanimity wasn't entirely altruistic. 30% stemmed from her inherent kindness, but the remaining 70% was likely due to the youth-preserving secret technique gifted to her by this lonely woman. This pitiable, isolated soul was none other than Otsutsuki Kaguya, trapped for millennia within her seal. One day, sensing the immense power of the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, Kaguya had drawn Kyosuke into the altar within her seal. Her two sons, Hagoromo and Hamura, had sealed her away for the greater good of the shinobi world, ensuring peace for future generations. Yet, despite their resolve, they had not subjected their mother to excessive suffering. The seal allowed her limited freedom of movement within a confined range, though she spent most of her time in a deep, restless slumber, isolated from the flow of time. When Kyosuke appeared, Kaguya initially mistook him for a savior sent by Black Zetsu, her loyal creation, tasked with orchestrating her eventual release. After all, the odds of someone with the bloodline powerful enough to awaken the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan reaching the moon altar by mere coincidence were astronomically low. Kyosuke, ever perceptive, revealed little. Instead, he used his silver tongue and natural charisma to gain Kaguya's trust. Currently, Kyosuke found himself constrained by his limitations. He lacked the necessary skill and range of the Flying Thunder God technique to traverse the vast space between the moon and Earth freely. As such, his ambitions relied heavily on his ongoing research into space-time barriers. He aimed to utilize space-time barriers to reopen the passage between Earth and the moon. And who better to guide him in this endeavor than the Otsutsuki Kaguya herself? Carrying a meal personally prepared by Mido, Kyosuke teleported into the secluded cave where the altar lay hidden. After performing a series of intricate seals, he successfully entered the confines of Kaguya's prison. If Black Zetsu were to learn of this, he would undoubtedly fall to his knees, fervently pleading for Kyosuke to liberate his revered mother. However, despite all his cunning and potential, Kyosuke was still far from possessing the power required to break the seal placed by the Sage of Six Paths and his brother, Hamura. The seal was a monumental work of power and foresight, designed to suppress Kaguya's immense strength indefinitely. To even attempt to break it, Kyosuke would need to ascend to a level far beyond his current abilities. One equal to or surpassing the Six Paths level. For now, he could only continue his puah. Ahem, no, he meant using his genuine sincerity to ease this woman's loneliness and gain her trust. P.S. Puah means when a man who studies and practices special techniques that are intended to be effective in attracting potential sexual partners. You're here, Kyosuke. After months of interaction, a sense of familiarity had developed between them. Kaguya, having regained much of her rationality and conversational ability, greeted him warmly when he arrived. This is a meal prepared by Mido herself. Kyosuke replied, placing the plate carefully on the ground. Without waiting for a response, he moved to a corner of the altar and began practicing the intricate space-time barrier technique Kaguya had been teaching him. Kaguya, the ancestor of Chakra, picked up the chopsticks with elegant precision, a far cry from the desperate way she had devoured meals when they first met. While eating, she didn't forget to offer guidance on Kyosuke's training. That seal there. Adjust it. It can be optimized. You're overcomplicating it. It'll hurt the barrier's efficiency. There, yes, there. No, no. Ugh, how can you be this clumsy? Kyosuke's eyebrow twitched as he felt his patience fray. Mentally, he resolved to ask Mido to add a touch more salt to the next meal to subtly convey his frustrations. Still, the dynamic between teacher and student created an unexpectedly warm and harmonious atmosphere. Even with the occasional jabs, there was an undeniable sense of mutual understanding. Through their interactions, Kyosuke came to a realization: Kaguya didn't simply see him as her savior or tool. Hidden within her eyes was a faint trace of familial affection, as though she saw a shadow of Indra in him. It was this same sentiment, perhaps, that explained her tears upon seeing Naruto and Sasuke in the distant future. A rare glimpse of the emotions buried beneath her godlike exterior. Watching Kaguya carefully arrange the dishes after their meal, Kyosuke sighed deeply and asked, "Must the divine tree be planted for the chakra fruit to be condensed?" At his words, Kaguya paused, glanced up, and responded with a calm yet somber tone. "I was once a servant to Ishiki. My mission was to be sacrificed to the divine tree, to become its nourishment." She looked down for a moment, her fingers lingering on the dish before her. "Unwilling to accept my fate, I took advantage of his carelessness, launching an attack that ultimately thwarted his mission to obtain the chakra fruit." Kyosuke listened intently as she continued, her voice carrying a weight of regret. "Now, after so many years, the Otsutsuki clan will undoubtedly send a second team to investigate." She hesitated, her expression darkening. "If my actions are discovered, I will face endless pursuit from the clan." History proved Kaguya's fears to be well-founded. The second team sent to Earth by the Otsutsuki clan was none other than Momoshiki and Kinshiki. At this thought, Kyosuke could no longer hold back his curiosity. He had longed to know the answer to a question that had been bothering him for some time. Is the Otsutsuki clan truly that powerful? Who, then, was Kaguya? She was a being with an indestructible body and unyielding will. Even after being sealed for countless years, she still possessed unparalleled strength. If not for her somewhat inexperienced combat awareness, she might have defeated the Sage of Six Paths and his brother long ago. For someone like her to experience fear meant that the strength of the Otsutsuki clan must indeed be terrifying. Yet, Kyosuke had no idea just how terrifying they were. Hearing his question, Kaguya fell silent for a long while. Her gaze seemed to drift, her thoughts returning to distant memories. "Our clan is unique," she began slowly, her voice carrying the weight of ancient knowledge. "We are born with extraordinarily long lifespans and possess the ability to reincarnate, allowing us to gain new life through our vessels." She paused, as though measuring her words carefully. "Yet, even in the vastness of the universe, filled with countless dangers, we are not immune to the threat of death. By a twist of fate, our ancestors stumbled upon a unique life form. By cultivating this life form, we learned to convert an entire planet's life force into the chakra fruit, a powerful and consumable resource." Kaguya's expression softened, her thoughts momentarily lost in the distant past. Consuming a chakra fruit ignites the divine fire within, awakening unimaginable divine abilities. She met Kyosuke's gaze then, her voice steady. "No matter if the body perishes or the soul withers for millennia, as long as the divine fire burns, we shall live forever." Through her explanation, Kyosuke roughly pieced together the truth. Consuming a chakra fruit granted one the ability to surpass physical limitations, igniting the divine fire within and transforming the consumer into an immortal being. The manifestations of the divine fire varied from individual to individual. For example, Kaguya's Rin Sharingan. The powerful eye on her forehead was one such visible sign of its awakening. This divine fire also awakened extraordinary abilities, such as a mnemonic. In a broader sense, Those Otsutsuki who had consumed chakra fruits truly embodied the traits of gods and could be considered gods in their own right. Kyosuke, his mind racing with the implications of Kaguya's words, couldn't help but ask. So, does that mean the Otsutsuki clan has many beings at the divine fire level? Kaguya's expression darkened, and she nodded solemnly. Yes. Especially the clan's enforcement squad. They are all terrifying experts who have ignited the divine fire. At the mention of the enforcement squad, a palpable sense of fear seemed to seep into Kaguya's words, the weight of her past experiences heavy in the air. Kyosuke, sensing the gravity of the situation, pressed on with another crucial question. Otsutsuki Ishiki. Did he eat a chakra fruit? Chapter 174, all at the divine fire level, the terrifying Otsutsuki enforcement squad. Did Otsutsuki Ishiki ever consume a chakra fruit? To this, Kyosuke could not be entirely certain. In the final battle, when Ishiki unleashed his full power, both Naruto and Sasuke were powerless to inflict any significant damage upon him. Even Kurama's new barrier mode, unlocked at the cost of his own life, only managed to cause limited harm, aggravating old injuries within Ishiki's body. From the outcome, it was clear that Ishiki was far beyond the level of an ordinary Six Paths power. However, claiming that he had consumed a chakra fruit didn't seem entirely accurate. If he had truly ignited the divine fire, how could Kaguya have succeeded in her ambush all those years ago? Kaguya, sensing Kyosuke's curiosity, hesitated for a moment before speaking, her voice tinged with a quiet reflection. After a brief pause, she began recounting a less than glorious chapter of history. Ishiki's natural talent wasn't particularly extraordinary, but he came from a privileged background. In his youth, he had the fortune of consuming a low-grade chakra fruit. She continued, her tone measured. The quality of chakra fruits varies greatly. There's a stark distinction between the superior and inferior ones, depending on how much chakra is absorbed. While Ishiki did consume a chakra fruit, the amount he ingested was minuscule. She paused, her gaze distant as she reflected on the strict, almost clinical nature of their clan. The Otsutsuki clan operates under a rigid set of rules, and relationships are cold and detached. Even with his noble heritage, Ishiki only managed to obtain a small morsel of the fruit. In Kaguya's words, that failure, Ishiki, was likely positioned at the threshold between the Sixth Path and Divine Flame level. At this point, Kyosuke began to piece together the root of the issue. The quality of chakra fruits seemed to vary significantly, and those consumed by the members of the Otsutsuki enforcement squad were likely the true divine fire igniters. He even speculated that many of them had consumed multiple chakra fruits, especially considering Kaguya's mention of the critical term, igniting a divine fire. If that were true, did this imply the existence of beings within the Otsutsuki who had ignited the divine fire not once, but twice? Or even thrice? In comparison, Ishiki, even at his full power, was merely a half-step into the divine flame level. Did indeed seem like a novice in this hierarchy of elite powerhouses. Kyosuke's curiosity deepened. Can I ask what kinds of special abilities the members of the enforcement squad possess? Kaguya's eyes momentarily clouded with thought before she responded. Each member of the enforcement squad possesses abilities that reflect the immense power granted by the divine fire. She paused, considering how best to explain. For example, my Mnemonic, a unique ability that allows me to forcibly shift spaces and create my own personal starting sphere dimension, was one such manifestation of divine power. Kyosuke's mind raced. He had a hunch that at the divine fire level, these individual awakened abilities would play a crucial role in combat. Good thing I still have my system. If push comes to shove, I'll wait until I've accumulated enough points to copy the best abilities for myself. You have so many questions, Kaguya said, giving him a beautiful yet faintly exasperated sidelong glance. After some thought, she reluctantly continued. After countless years, my clan has broadly classified the abilities awakened at the divine fire level into several categories. She leaned forward, as if preparing to impart something grave. Elemental manipulation, spatial temporal, space-time, control, physical enhancement, psychic abilities, binding techniques, laws of nature, healing capabilities, and so on. The enforcement squad comprises a vast number of members, encompassing nearly all types of these abilities. She gave a slight shake of her head, almost as if to herself. Mastery over controlled creations through Spirit Beast, Shikigami combat, devouring consciousness through dreamscapes with techniques like Dream Devour, issuing death declarations via words of power, and even geological manipulation through celestial laws, like crust manipulation. Kaguya lowered her head with a deep sigh, her expression turning somewhat desolate. Even without their mortality, the sheer variety of their abilities could bring devastating destruction to the ordinary shinobi of this world. Her voice softened, tinged with a hint of regret. Now you understand, don't you? It's not that I was ruthless. Survival demanded I continuously harvest chakra. She paused before adding, her gaze distant. Otherwise, if the enforcement squad were to descend, the shinobi world would face the most horrifying extinction event imaginable. Kyosuke couldn't help but think. So that's it. This is your way of washing your hands clean, isn't it? He rubbed his chin thoughtfully, silently weighing the truth behind Kaguya's words. Though she appeared to be a high and mighty, naive woman, in truth, she was a shrewd and cunning figure. She had not only rebelled against her superior but had also successfully deceived her sons, Sage of Sixth Paths and Otsutsuki Hamura, for years. Anyone who underestimated her as a fool was likely the truly ignorant one. I understand now, Kyosuke said, nodding as if to acknowledge her well-intentioned efforts. But beneath the surface of his words, there was a deeper reflection. Today's conversation had been profoundly enlightening. The only thing more terrifying than a powerful enemy was an unknown one. Now that he understood the source of their power, Kyosuke realized he could devise strategies to counter it. If the Otsutsuki could travel the universe and harvest, surely he could emulate their methods. As Kaguya had mentioned, the universe was vast, with countless planets teeming with life. Kyosuke could set out on an interstellar journey, locate suitable planets, and plant 10-tailed saplings there. From there, he could harvest chakra fruits and accumulate system points. A far more exciting prospect than remaining confined to the shinobi world. Once others grew strong enough, he might even adopt the Otsutsuki's operational model, dispatching members to collect fruits and streamline the harvesting process. This was his version of fighting fire with fire. Of course, Kyosuke knew it was too early to act on such plans. With decades left before the arrival of formidable figures like Momoshiki and Kinshiki, he had plenty of time to grow stronger. When the time came, he would find a way to eliminate Ishiki and claim the infant 10 tails for himself. I really am a genius, Kyosuke murmured to himself with a smirk, his confidence unwavering. Ah! From inside the room came Mito's anguished screams, echoing relentlessly through the halls. How could this happen? Outside, Kyosuke paced back and forth, his usual calm demeanor replaced by agitation. His mind raced in frustration, and he scratched his head in helplessness. The peaceful days had flown by, and before he knew it, the day of Mito's labor had arrived. To ease her suffering, Kyosuke had arranged for several medical ninja to assist, even administering a dose of anesthesia. Yet, to his surprise, the baby's vitality proved far stronger than anticipated, leaving Mito, despite her Uzumaki constitution, completely drained and writhing in pain. Come on, you little rascal, get out of there already. Anxious and at his wits' end, Kyosuke felt an overwhelming urge to perform a C-section himself. But Mito had refused, insisting that natural childbirth was better for the baby. You just don't trust science, Kyosuke had retorted, frustration creeping into his voice. At last, after what felt like an eternity, the piercing cries of a newborn filled the air. Haruto Uchiha had been born, joining Kyosuke and Mito's small family. Bursting into the room, Kyosuke cast a quick glance at the wrinkled, squishy infant before rushing to Mito's side. He clasped her sweat-drenched hand tightly. You've worked so hard, he said softly, his rare tenderness shining through. It hurts. Mito pouted, her eyes involuntarily drifting toward Haruto, who was being cleaned nearby. Is that really my child? The thought flitted through her mind. When the baby was brought over and placed between them, Kyosuke and Mito exchanged a glance, both unable to contain themselves. In unison, they uttered the same 3 words, he's so ugly. They say sons take after their mothers. If he's ugly, it's definitely not my fault, Kyosuke declared seriously. Rubbish. Rolling her eyes, Mito shot back. Look at his nose and mouth. They're exactly like yours. If he grows up ugly, it's all on you. No, it's on you. It's your fault. Your fault. Wah. Haruto cried loudly, as if on cue, seemingly worried about his own appearance as well. At the sight of the tiny baby's outrage, the couple exchanged a look and burst into laughter, the sound of their joy filling the room as they basked in the warmth of their new family of 3. From today onward, our family has 1 more member. But now that I think about it, isn't having only 1 child a bit lonely? Well, that depends on your efforts, Kyosuke. To serve you wholeheartedly, my lady. Chapter 175, 5 years. Do you know how I lived through them? Time is like a cheap prostitute. Passionate on the surface, yet cold and ruthless the moment the money changes hands and the act is done. Lingering affection, on the other hand, resembles a lowly client. It appears sincere and eager, yet beneath the surface, it hides nothing but selfish intent, seeking to exploit without bearing the cost. Whether one wishes it or not, time always slips by silently and swiftly, vanishing in the blink of an eye. Unknowingly, 5 years had passed since Kyosuke and his family became stranded on the moon. He, who was once a naive 7 or 8-year-old boy, had grown into a 21-year-old young man. Someone with a home to protect and responsibilities to shoulder. By the standards of the shinobi world, this age was considered the prime of adulthood in his previous life. Within a secluded training ground lined with countless cherry blossoms, cold winds carried pink petals across the lush green grass. Amidst this serene beauty, the crisp, resonant clash of blades broke the silence as several figures darted across the field. At the center of the skirmish stood a man. His features, delicate yet resolute, were framed by a sharp, unwavering gaze. Beneath the folds of his black robe lay a muscular physique, brimming with raw power. A striking contrast to the tranquility surrounding him. Majestic and domineering, every movement he made exuded an oppressive aura that demanded submission. The Kusanagi sword spun in his hands, its gleaming edge reflecting the soft glow of the cherry blossoms. Kyosuke's focus was absolute, his composure unshaken as he countered the relentless attacks of 7 shadow clones encircling him. At his current level of strength, few individuals could match him in battle, let alone serve as worthy sparring partners.